The Kalamazoo Conflict by Joquan Da Hooligan, 1975 CE. 3 cycles ago, the Great Spring Flood had swept the state of Kalamazoo, one of the most devastating natural disasters ever recorded. Following a massive spring storm that dropped untold buckets of rain onto the region in a single day, doubling the rainfall of 1973 CE and 1974 CE combined, with the ground already saturated from melting snow. And previous rainfalls, massive sewage overflow engulfed the region. Hundreds of families were evacuated from their homes. Damage to public infrastructure, homes, and businesses soared into the billions. Despite independently funded humanitarian efforts from the 41st Citrine Party House District, cleanup costs nearly depleted the state coffers. The nation's sovereign had declared the state of Kalamazoo a natural disaster zone, granting the state access to much-needed national aid, grants, and low-interest loans. Emergency crews worked to clear the debris, redirect water flow, and provide shelter to displaced families. In that ensuing chaos, a cabal of corruption would arise. Dr. Emerlin Cast, chairman of the Kalamazoo State Indoctrination Board, accused by many of miseducating the state's youth and associated with unproven teachers' union pension fraud accusations, had secretly conspired with Joel Mowat, Magnum Maris 5, 41st Azurite House District Pro Tem, and Byron Watson, the Kalamazoo State Auditor General, to orchestrate a Ponzi scheme that would siphon national emergency funds into shell corporation accounts they themselves set up. Using these shell corporations, they would half-heartedly participate in humanitarian and restoration efforts. Then Byron Watson would turn in faulty expenditure reports to the Capitol in Alphason, the nation's capital city, entitling them to massive tax breaks and refunds. To maintain a positive public image during the restoration period, they would use street-level enforcers like the Raines brothers to pay off news crews, who in turn would broadcast images of the 325th MM5 Kalamazoo Central Division, one of the Azurite politically aligned branches of the national military, commanded by Cedrice Lockett, removing debris and rebuilding infrastructure while secretly they looted the homes of families evacuated in the crisis. Many news crews who chose to toe the ethical line were dealt with harshly. Within 2 cycles, despite little effort, if any, by the Azurite Party, the restoration of Kalamazoo was near completion. The rail lines began to bustle once again with tons of cereal grain, the cornerstone of the regional economy. Many of the displaced families never returned to the state of Kalamazoo, leaving a wide open market of well-paying jobs, leading to a migration of many from the eastern part of the nation. In this migration, a new threat would present itself to the Azurite Party, a long political stronghold in the region. Now, more and more families aligned with Jasper ideology were finding themselves calling Kalamazoo their new home. The Kalamazoo State Indoctrination Board, itself Azurite aligned, had for years dictated not only the public curriculum but the cultural tone of the state. It promoted docility. It scrubbed history. It censored labor theory. Yet as the Jasper influx grew stronger, unionist thinkers and resettled families' tensions escalated. In a bold maneuver to tighten its grip, the board successfully lobbied Alphason, the revered national capital of Magnum Maris 5, to grant federal registry status to the Kalamazoo Rail Depot. The designation brought in both protection and funding, and shortly thereafter, plans were approved for an expansion of the Kalamazoo Galleria, a high-traffic commercial complex, further strengthening the Azurite political foothold on the region. What they wanted was a monument to Azurite wealth and power, said District Councilor Van Seck of the MM5 41st Jasper House District. What they got was a detonator. While Azurite leaders celebrated, the working class simmered. Jasper-aligned citizens were finding themselves underpaid and overcrowded. But now, the new registry terms, slashed wages, tightened oversight, and cut off union negotiations. This sparked the first series of pickets and organized walkouts, spearheaded quietly by figures like James Hofs, union president of local IBEW, Local 131, and reps from both the Citrine and Jasper aligned 41st District houses. When these peaceful actions began disrupting freight movement and Galleria expansion crews, violence was ordered. The Raines brothers, known enforcers of the Azurite agenda, deployed Coaster, their Level A 25 enforcer, to restore order. The pickets quickly turned to bloodshed. That's when the Washington Street families stepped in, inspired not only by their long-running feud with the Raines brothers, but by the economic pinch their own family members felt during the railway labor disputes. They armed the pickets. They protected the union leaders, and for a short, flickering moment, they held the line. But the Azurite machine escalated. The 325th MM5 Kalamazoo Central Division was called in under the guise of regional peacekeeping. Instead, they brought open war, and when Captain Smock, beloved officer of the Jasper Line 204th MM5, refused to abandon his post during a standoff near the depot, he was assassinated in full view of civilians. Coster pulled the trigger. The world pulled its eyes toward Kalamazoo. Smock's murder ignited a national outcry. Within hours, news of the execution reached Alphason. Legislative chambers erupted. Reports of military collusion with criminal enforcers circulated. Syndicates and battle groups, many dormant since the post-war period, began to stir. Crime families, civic militias, and former soldiers across the nation began to quietly pick sides. These actions reached beyond politics, from as far west as Benton Harbor to as far east as the province of Port Do. A multi-region firestorm had erupted. Even the Conat Jordan crime family took notice. Their A100 operative, Martin Maxwell, aligned with the Jasper ideology, formally entered the conflict. As tensions rippled across state lines, even once neutral divisions like the 31st MM5 Genesee Central Division were forced to respond. Lacking seasoned troops, they began issuing drafts through local populations, pulling in reluctant citizens like Phil Mitchell philanthropist and potion maker into the fold. This wasn't just a wage dispute, said General Curtis Shepard of the 217th. It was a referendum on who gets to define the nation's future, the ruling class or the people feeding it. By the year S5th cycle, what began as a Union walkout had become a full-blown ideological battlefield, one where the dividing lines between military loyalty, criminal justice, and national identity were torn wide open. And in the shadows of that fire, still unknown to the world, the fates of the Maxwells and the Rands would quietly converge, because every revolution begins somewhere. And the children of that fire would carry its heat far beyond the state lines. The state of Kalamazoo just found itself in between the beat of the pulse. The moment after one storm hit calmed, and the moment before another one would brew. Chapter 1. Alphason Ingham National Ethics Chamber. Your educational doctrine did more than fail, it distorted. It glamorized dissonance, rewarded performative rebellion, and severed an entire generation from their inner rhythm. Counselor Van Seck, voice carried across the marble floor of the Ingham National Ethics Chamber, firm and resonant amid the shifting murmurs of the assembly. He raised one hand as if tuning the room to a higher frequency. If I may quote from the Book of Flow, he continued, voice now calm and sharpened by intent. She moves like a shadow in the corner of your mind, not to steal your vision, but to test your focus. And you, sir, failed that test. His words struck the chamber like a verdict. Before him stood Dr. Emerlin Cast, longtime chair of the Kalamazoo State Indoctrination Board, flanked by two federal handlers and flinching under the weight of public disgrace. His azurite pen was polished, but his eyes were sunken. This board, Sec continued, turning slightly to address the rows of delegates, has weaponized curriculum. It has replaced inquiry with obedience. It has silenced dissent. And now it has blood on its hands. A murmur swept the rows, mostly Jasper-aligned delegates nodding in quiet agreement. Even a few undecided shifted in their seats. Sec took one step forward. We are not merely discussing pedagogical theory. We are dissecting the prelude to a war, a rail depot soaked in blood, a galleria built on silence, a captain shot dead in full view of the public. He turned again, now facing Dr. Koss directly. You built the doctrine, you passed the standards, and in doing so, you taught a generation to swallow servitude and call it stability. Cass' reply came quiet and composed, but it wavered at the edges. Counselor Sec, with respect, we do not control wage laws. We do not command battle groups, and we most certainly do not give orders to criminal organizations. You reconfuse an educational infrastructure with political fallout. No, Doctor, Sec interrupted. I am clarifying it. A hush. Your policies didn't just miseducate the people, they prepared them for exploitation, for control, for collapse. And now the nation sees it. Overhead, the ethics committee's central clock ticked. Somewhere in the gallery, an aide whispered to another, but no one interrupted, because everyone in that room knew they were no longer debating curriculum, they were debating culpability. Koss stiffened, then barked back. 50 cycles ago, 80% of Kalamazoo students couldn't even read. We turned a region of peasant farmers into stewards of their own destiny. From the creek to the zoo, the region thrives because of the educational backbone that we laid the foundation for. Sec raised his chin again, stone-faced. From the creek to the zoo, he said. The region burns, sir. Bang, bang, bang. The jade-aligned ethics committee chair brought down her gavel hard. The chamber flinched. She reached for her glass and poured calmly, as though cooling the tension by ritual alone. Apparently, she said, these proceedings will lead us nowhere but a shouting match. She sipped once. Deliberate. We'll sustain. For now, we'll pick this back up on Fallville. Hopefully that'll give both of you gentlemen enough time to reflect and calm yourselves. Chairs scraped the floor. Pages shuffled. The murmurs returned. Somewhere in the back, the clicking of a reporter's typewriter echoed faintly beneath the chamber's skylights. The hearing was adjourned. But the war was far from over. Later that evening, Red Cedar River Park, south of Alphason. The wind ran sharp along the river's edge. Sparrows danced above the shallows, but the trees stood still. The Capitol dome glowed faintly in the distance. A shadowy figure, collar raised, watched the water with narrowed eyes. He took one final drag of his cigarette, then flicked it toward the gravel path and crushed it underfoot. Behind him, the sound of a car grew louder, low tires on damp pavement. A long black limousine rolled slowly into the lot. Not too fast, not too flashy. The kind of vehicle that knew its way around the back roads of power. The limo came to a halt. The back window lowered halfway. How did it go? The shadowy figure asked, voice flat. How the hell do you think it went? Dr. Koss spat back. The window rolled down fully. Koss shoved the door open hard, nearly catching the figure's knee, and climbed in with a sour scowl. His suit rumpled, his azurite pen crooked. He didn't wait for an invitation. Yo man was too fucking reckless, Koss hissed. Captain Smock wasn't supposed to die in front of a crowd. That wasn't the plan. That wasn't the fucking deal. The figure stepped in after him, sat slowly, closed the door. Silence filled the space like smoke. Then the figure spoke calm, even-toned, a voice that rolled like gravel beneath velvet. He pulled rank on the wrong block, and he tried to get brave in front of the wrong crowd. Coster handled it. Handled it? Koss barked. You call that handling it? You know what happens now? You lit the damn fuse. I got Van Sek quoting scripture in front of my ethics tribunal. I got Jaspers crawling through committee halls like it's liberation season. And I got 4 battle groups sending memos to Alphason asking who's really in charge. So let them ask. The A100 said. Kaz blinked. You not hearing me? No, the figure cut in. You not hearing me. He turned slowly to Cast. Face still shadowed by the interior lights, but jawline hard like stone. You came to us. Remember that. You asked us to shake the tree. You asked us to keep the workers from breaking your depot contract. You didn't specify how clean or how loud. You just wanted it done. Cass's eyes dropped. His fury turned inward. Fine, he muttered. Fine. Then here's a new ask. He leaned closer, voice low. Kill Sek. The figure didn't respond, didn't flinch, just stared. Cass leaned closer still. We need a message. Loud. Final. You don't get to martyr your way to the throne. Put him in the fucking ground. Silence. Then the figure chuckled. Dry. Cold. Not amused. You want to make Van Sek a martyr? On ethics chamber soil? While his whole district's lighting candles for smock in front of the depot? He shook his head. That's not a hit. That's a coronation. Kaaz slammed the armrest. Then what the hell do we do? The A100 of the reins leaned in slightly. You wait. And you bleed him slow. He adjusted the cuff of his coat. Looked out the window. You want Sek gone? We'll break his counsel. Not his neck. Kaz said nothing. Just stared out the opposite window in silence as the limo pulled away, its tail lights reflecting off the Red Cedar River. Chapter 2. Blaze in the Corn Belt. Millwood Village, Corn Belt district outskirts of Kalamazoo. The fields burned behind them rows of dry corn and grain, igniting in waves as fire traced through the furrows. Smoke twisted skyward in a slow dance of ruin. She packed my bags last night, pre-flight. 0 hour, 9 a.m. The melody drifted from an expensive speaker rig wired to the top of a 217th MM5 tank, echoing across the fields like a hymn for the dying. Lieutenant Doyon Rand moved calmly through the blaze, flamethrower in hand, a pipe clenched between his teeth as he sang under his breath. He wasn't singing for the men. He wasn't singing for the mission. It was just him, the music, and the fire. Behind him at left flank, an old neighborhood friend of his from Finkel Acres, Darius Lewis. Years ago, they enlisted together to get away from the hustle and bustle of Finkel life and see what the central part of the nation had to offer. He outranked him now. He had made officer, and Darius was still an NCO, but he considered him an equal. Then, something shifted. Chuka, 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 Chuka. Rand froze mid-verse. The distant thump grew louder. Rhythmic. Rotors. He turned toward the sound, eyes narrowing. Cut the music, he called out. The gunnery sergeant atop the tank obeyed instantly, reaching over and clicking off the speaker. The sudden silence was filled by the echo of approaching blades. Chuka, 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 chuka. Rand squinted against the sky. Sounds like Chinook's inbound, he muttered. Then louder. Get rid of your flamethrowers and get me anti-air Ricky Tick. Get General Shepard on the line. We've got incoming birds. His voice snapped the troops into motion. No questions, no confusion. They scattered from the burn line like memories fleeing the heat of the present, abandoning flamethrowers and rushing toward the armament trucks. One by one, they emerged with rocket launchers and shoulder-fired anti-air weapons. Rand moved like lightning, covering ground with brutal precision. He grabbed an RPG, hoisted it over his shoulder, and climbed a scorched grain ridge for better sight lines. Eyes up. They were breaking tree cover. Through the thick black smoke, 12 blue azurite-marked Chinook helicopters thundered into view low and fast, with gunners already at the doors. The lead bird let loose a burst that shredded through the upper field and shattered a silo, scattering grain and flame into the air. 2 of the 217th Jeeps were destroyed. Return fire, Rand shouted. Launchers fired. The first firing team rockets missed wide. The second team hit 5 Chinook center mass, blowing the birds open in a series of violent bursts. One of the wrecks spiraled, caught its tail on a fence line, and flipped end over end before slamming into the dirt, skidding to a halt in pieces. Private Llewellyn, barely 19 cycles old and crouched near the rear supply truck, was caught in the shockwave. A twisted piece of fuselage whistled through the smoke and tore across his thigh, dropping him instantly. He screamed, clutching his leg. "Llewellyn S. down!" a voice cried out. As they headed to a tank for cover, more shots came from the lead helicopter, striking Darius, his body twisted mid-stride before collapsing into a crimson-stained patch of burnt wheat. Rand didn't hesitate. He bounded down the ridge, boots slamming against the charred dirt, dodging gunfire and debris like a machine built for chaos. One round zipped past his shoulder. He ducked, rolled, came up firing, and launched his RPG clean into the belly of the 6th helicopter. The explosion was instant. Metal bloomed in the air like black flowers. The remaining birds saw the fate of their brothers and banked hard to retreat north. Smoke streaked across the sky in their wake. With a scowl on his face, bitter from losing Darius, military discipline demanded that he remain calm. Rand dropped the launcher and slid beside Llewellyn, yanking his belt free and tying it tight above the wound. The kid was conscious but pale. "You'll live," Rand muttered, cinching the strap. "Try not to pass out before the bird gets here." Overhead, the battlefield quieted. The fire still raged, but the airstrike was over. Then came the crackle of radio static. "Lieutenant Rand, this is General Shepard. What's the situation on the ground?" "Over." Rand keyed his mic. "A flock of birds just took a shit on my field, sir," he said. "One casualty, and Private Llewellyn has been injured. He'll require a medvac." The pause was brief, but warm. "I'm dispatching backup now, Lieutenant," came Shepard's reply. "Hold tight, son. Support is inbound." That was likely P. Thompson. He's been giving us hell from the air the past few weeks. Rand stood, eyes still locked on the horizon where the other birds had vanished. "He'll be back," Rand said quietly. "And so will I." 6 Blue, 325th MM, 5 Chinooks en route to Kalamazoo Central Air Base. Inside the lead Chinook, its rotors carved hard through the dusk, a low mechanical grind echoing inside the hull. Smoke from the scorched millwood field still stained the clouds behind them. Commander P. Thompson leaned forward in his seat, headset clamped tight, eyes scanning the scorched horizon as if it might reach back at him. He keyed his radio. "P. Thompson to Kalamazoo Central. How do you read?" 5x5, Commander, what's your SID rep?" He paused, then continued. "Millwood Village, somewhat secure. They read no longer burning the fields, at least not for now. But something was different this time." "Copy." "What was different?" Thompson exhaled sharply through his nose. His voice dropped a register. "Intel indicated these were low-level field operatives. A 000s, maybe a 00s, tops. But the tactics I saw down there," he hesitated, "that wasn't textbook battle group protocol. That was improvisational, fast, calculated, high-level instinct, the kind of movement you see from A-10S and above." "A 10? You sure?" "No," he said flatly. "But whoever hit that 6th bird didn't miss. Hit us before we got target lock. Moved like he already knew where we'd break formation. We lost 5 helos as soon as we got there. That doesn't happen unless someone on the ground echoed in codist." "Understood. General Lockett will want visual ID. Debrief en route. Routing updates to the A-25 officers on duty." Thompson leaned back in his seat. The vibrations of the Chinook rattled through his spine, but his mind was still in the smoke. "There's someone in that unit," he muttered to himself, with a strong density. He didn't say it out loud, but he was already thinking it. That wasn't an A-10. That was something higher, something dangerous. The humming of machines played soft against the quiet crackle of portable lanterns. Medics shuffled in hushed tones, boots muffled by canvas flooring. Outside, the distant murmur of field generators vibrated like a forgotten storm. Private Llewellyn blinked awake under the faint blue glow of a saline drip. His thigh was wrapped tight in polymer foam and field dressings, a mild sedative keeping the sharpest pain away. Next to him, slouched in a chair with one leg propped on a med cart, sat Lieutenant Doyon Rand pipe in his mouth, arms crossed, and a distant look behind his eyes. "You re-alive," Rand said flatly, not looking up. Llewellyn smirked, voice dry. "That's supposed to be comforting, sir?" Rand gave a half shrug. "Means I don't gotta write your mother. That's comforting enough." Unfortunately, I can't say the same for Sergeant Lewis. They both shared a reflective silence. "How long did you know Sergeant Lewis, sir?" "Long time," he replied. "Back in F.A., near the Quincy area. We fought against Fairfield so much in the streets, we figured why not fight in a real army." Silence settled in. Changing the subject, Rand reached into the inside pocket of his field jacket and pulled out a folded letter. The edges were soft, the crease worn from too many rereads. "Wife wrote me," Rand muttered, eyes scanning the text. "Back home in F.A., she's been arguing with my mother. Blame me like I'm supposed to mediate from a fucking war zone." "You married, sir?" Llewellyn asked. "Married, yeah. Domestic bliss and detachment paperwork all in one package." He tucked the letter away, then pulled out a second item, a photo. Folded once, corners curling, he handed it to Llewellyn. "That's my baby sister, Ruby Jean. Just got accepted to Wayne State Medical, pre-surgical track." Llewellyn blinked. She's beautiful." Rand didn't smile. "If you even think about touching my baby sister," he said, calm as glass, "I'll cut your fucking dick off with a broken mess kit spoon." Llewellyn went pale. Rand took the photo back and pocketed it, finally cracking the faintest smirk. "Just so we re-clear." Llewellyn laughed nervously, then winced from the pain. "Sir, I thought you didn't like me." Rand leaned back in the chair. "I don't like most people." He tapped ash from his pipe into a half-crushed ration tin. "But you've got instincts. Not many kids your age would have held the line like that. You saw what was coming and stayed put." "Didn't feel brave," Llewellyn admitted. "It never does," Rand said. "That's how you know it's real." He stood slowly, pipe still in hand. "Rest up, soldier. You might be walking with a limp for a while, but hell, better than going home in a box." He turned to leave, then paused. "You remind me of someone." "Yourself?" Rand didn't turn back. "Don't push it." The canvas door flapped shut behind him. Outside, the night was humming again. 217th, MM, 5 Battle Group forward position, Corn Belt District perimeter. The canvas flap dropped behind Lieutenant Doyon Rand with a tired sway, closing out the gentle beep in the monitors and the rustle of bandages being checked. For a moment, all he could hear was the low thrum of the generators and distant chatter from the night crew. General Curtis Shepard stood just outside, coat collar popped against the breeze, field clipboard in hand. His eyes weren't on the paperwork, though they were fixed on the medbay door behind Rand. "How S. Llewellyn?" Rand answered without hesitation. "Stable. Leg still there. Docs say the bone might hold if he doesn't get cocky." Shepard nodded slowly, a trace of tension easing from his jaw. "Tough bastard." Rand nodded once. "He didn't run." "He's green," Shepard said, "but he's got grit. We need to make sure that kind doesn't get swallowed up too early." He looked at Rand then, eyes narrowing just a little in thought. "Sorry about Sergeant Lewis." He shifted the clipboard aside and crossed his arm. "How old is your boy back home now?" Rand blinked at the question, not surprised by its arrival, just by its timing. "Just turned 32 cycles." "Damn," Shepard muttered. "Feels like yesterday he was still running around with those busted boots and a baseball." Rand smirked faintly. "He still carries that baseball. He's still giving his mother hell?" "He's giving everybody hell," Rand replied. There was a long pause between them two soldiers on the edge of another war, tethered not just by blood and chain of command, but by time, by what they'd already buried, by what they still stood to lose. He ever talk about enlisting? Shepard asked, voice casual but measured. No, I think he wants to play for the Tigers. He's not built like me, at least for this military stuff. Shepard gave a short exhale, not quite a laugh. No one is. Another pause. Then Shepard's expression shifted again, sharpening, cooling. He tapped the corner of the clipboard. Report says your airstrike came in too clean, too precise. Thompson? Rand's jaw twitched. Blue A insignia. Chinook. Broke pattern just before we locked. Only one pilot in that unit with that freedom. P. Thompson. Shepard confirmed. They classified him as an A1. That's what they filed him as, Rand said. What I saw out there was not that low tier. You thinking he's A5? Rand's voice was like granite. Possibly. Shepard took a few steps off and looked away into the smoke-hazed dark, where the hills still smoldered like breathing giants. You think he knew anyone above a 000 was down there? I don't know if he gave a shit. Silence. Then Rand added, quieter this time. That's what bothers me. Shepard finally handed him a sealed operations file. Dark green envelope, direct from command. Rand took it without a word. Dicks amongst brass are hardening, Shepard muttered, and Thompson's name's crossing more desks than yours. Good, Rand said. We will no doubt see him again, Shepard replied. When we do, I want you to keep your head. Shepard walked away. Yeah, I'll keep my head, Rand thought to himself. And take his. Just you wait, Henry Higgins. Just you fucking wait. Chapter 3. Rhythm in the Smoke. MM 541st. Jasper House District Offices. Lover Lane, Portage. The walls of the district offices were lined with limestone and red maple trim, a faint architectural nod to when Portage was a quiet factory suburb. Now it was war council ground. The once open civic chamber had been retrofitted with blast-proof doors, blackened windows, and a 20-foot screen wired to surveillance satellites, camera feeds, and encrypted comms. The war had made everything harder, but also more honest. At the center of the room sat a long obsidian table. Around it were chairs notched with the scars of 1,000 arguments. Seated now was a motley crew of vastly different make. Soldiers, crime lords, politicians, a warlock, a district attorney on unofficial leave, and at least one man who hadn't spoken since entering the building. The room was dark, except for the flicker of the screen. Grainy black and white footage played. A convoy, a non-military line of cargo trucks, rolled down Stockbridge Avenue through what used to be the Oakwood area. The lead vehicle had medical insignias. Aid workers could be seen in the open trucks, passing crates of medical supplies, thermal blankets, and bulk food sacks marked for civil zones along the outer districts. Then came the ambush. Quick. Not so coordinated, but brutal. A separate camera angle from a static drone showed the moment gunmen flanked the convoy. The camera panned as a blue van screeched into view. Some of the women were dragged off screen. One tried to fight and was hit with the butt of a rifle. Another man was shot outright, head turned to paste against the side of the truck. In the background, someone tagged the wall near a pharmacy with looping, aggressive strokes. SDYT. As the van drove away, the video cut to static. A beat passed, then the overhead lights snapped back on. The illumination was sudden, surgical. Eyes adjusted slowly. Most in the room blinked. One didn't. From the far end of the table, hidden partially in the shadow of a support beam, Martin Maxwell leaned back in his chair, hair slicked, collar open, 2 rings on one hand. As the light hit him, he casually sniffed the last trace of a bump off the side of his thumb and flicked a nail across his nose. A loud whisper from the center of the room. SDYT. The Silver Domes of Yaktown. Silver Domes, muttered one of the Washington Street family capos. Who the fuck are they? They ain't from around here. From the state of Oakland came a response from a man in uniform, a 2531st MM5 Genesee Central Division Intelligence Branch, We've encountered them before. Southern edge of our border near Grand Blanc. Used to be local claimers. Hitters, shakedowns, street-level grind. That's not what this was. They with the Rains brothers? Asked the Washington Street capo. They definitely with the Rains brothers, the operative answered. You don't move through the Edison district without a nod from them. Nobody's gonna come out this far just fucking around. Not in this climate. Not without backing. Not without permission. The Washington Street capo tilted his head. If it's just medicine and food, why not hit McLaren? That runs closer to them, cleaner, less guarded. They don't want the medicine, another Jasper Line rep answered. They want disruption. They want delay. Since the Union walk-offs, pretty much all transit is by road, not rail around here. This kind of place stalls everything logistical as far as civic operations. Martin Maxwell had a certain look about him when he was thinking. It looked like he had no concern at all for whatever was going on, but in all actuality, algorithms were moving through his head at lightning speed. I've got reports on my desk of guys matching this description being dropped off in helicopters from the 325th near the Candlewicks. Another operative added. Martin finally leaned forward, elbows on the table. I got a nephew, young cat, he said, voice smooth. Prince. He works the Oakland State area, near Unity Park. Handles cargo, runs a few crews, puts on a good face when needed. A few heads turned his way. Martin continued. He's young, but he's hip to the rhythm of that area. I'll get in contact with him, see if he knows anything about a new crew of cats around Yaktown calling themselves the Silver Domes. Silence hung in the air. A second Washington Street voice broke it. This ain't just one hit. There's been disruptions near Monarch Mill Pond and up through Crane Park area, coordinated. You can feel it. Azurite bastards know the tide's turning, someone else said. They were panicking. The intelligence officer nodded grimly. This state is tense. Every cell, every battle group, every underworld node is holding their breath. Silver Domes, the Rains, they not just lashing out, they reprobing, testing. Which of us is gonna flinch? From one of the side chairs, a woman in a field medic S-coat leaned forward. Someone better flinch soon. Those aid workers were ours. Another voice. Jasper blood. Martin gave a small, two-fingered salute at the word. Then let's make it expensive, baby. They all stared at the screen again. Nothing played now, just static. But in that static, they could already hear it. Boots, sirens, helicopters, gunfire, the hiss of surveillance planes carving across winter skies, supply lines stretching thin, allies turning cold. The crawl toward a larger ignition, the state of Kalamazoo, was boiling. The factions were converging. And in the folds of smoke and shifting alliances, a name like Martin Maxwell meant war, logistics, untraceable firepower, and perhaps most importantly, a willingness to bleed where it hurt. Because whoever painted SDYT on that wall had just declared more than an attack. They declared a front, and the marble veins of the state, bloodied as they were, would carry that message far. The stench of oil and rust filled the stale air, broken only by the low murmur of men counting, stacking, and quietly arguing over the spoils. The warehouse buzzed like a hive of rot loot from at least 3 recent hijackings, arranged in rows of crates, pallets, and barrels. Medical kits, ration boxes, industrial parts, and cases of water all bore the insignia of relief caravans meant for Jasper-aligned territories. Coster stood near the center of it all, hands behind his back, lips curved in a half smirk as he admired the scene. There was blood behind the bounty. He could still hear the screams if he listened close enough. But to Coster, this was the sound of leverage. Beside him stood a bald-headed miscreant in blue jeans and a Franklin Championship jersey, fingering the edge of a tactical bag. "Don't be too proud of yourself, Costa," the bald-headed man muttered, eyeing a wrapped crate of pharmaceuticals. Word out is, just as you rebuilding up alliances so S. Washington Street, a mere 5 fingers is no match for a mighty arm. Costa chuckled, unbothered. What we were building here, he replied, is more powerful than they can possibly imagine. Not only are we disrupting the flow of logistics throughout the region, this bounty here will fetch a pretty penny when we ship it down to Edwardsburg. The bald-headed man grinned. Speaking of pretty pennies. Ah, yes, said Coster. With a snap of his fingers, one of his subordinates stepped forward, holding a silver-rimmed suitcase, polished and heavy. Costa took it in both hands, offering it to the bald-headed man with a casual tilt of the wrist. But just as their hands touched the handle, thwunk! A blade long curved forged black with a strange humming edge sliced through the darkness and embedded itself in the suitcase, driving it clean into the aluminum siding of one of the hijacked trucks. The cash inside burst partially from the seams, torn by steel. Silence. Men turned, weapons half drawn, but no one fired. From the shadows at the edge of the warehouse, a figure emerged, slow, deliberate, backlit by a soft amber glow spilling in from a loading dock S-cracked panel door. A 100, no question. He didn't walk so much as arrive, each step smooth as vapor. His coat swept behind him like he'd walked straight from some royal execution. His eyes, even in shadow, pinned the room down like a courtroom cross-examination. He pulled the sword from the briefcase in one fluid motion. No blood, just tension. Who spray-painted SDYT on the wall? His voice didn't need volume. It commanded. The bald-headed man swallowed, stepping back instinctively. A mere marking of the territory, sir, he replied humbly. Nothing more. Territory, the figure echoed. What is this Pike Street? The bald-headed man bowed slightly. Do pardon us. I can understand your frustration, and we will respect your boundaries moving forward. The A100 nodded once, slow, chilling. As would do you well to do so, young sir. Now take your money, make your leave. The bald-headed man motioned to his crew. Nobody argued. Within seconds, they were gathering the briefcase still torn and melting into the edges of the warehouse, disappearing through side doors. Once they were gone, the A100 turned to Coster. Coster, a word. Coster straightened slightly, but did not retreat. Our dear friend, Dr. Cass, the figure said smoothly, is not satisfied with the way you handled Commander Smock. He believes you've made him a martyr. Coster frowned, shifting his jaw. I believe there's no honor for the dead, the A100 continued, but I did assure the dear doctor that we would do our diligence and continue the disruption of this so-called Jasper alliance. He paced slowly past the crates, sword now resting against his shoulder, watching the shadows around them like they might whisper. I understand new forces are at play. I understand they were trying to move unregistered weapons through soft corridors. I understand that displeases me. He turned fully back to Coster, stopping mere inches from him. See to it that this activity ceases immediately. Coster gave a shallow nod. It will be handled. The figure looked up, eyes sharp like glass. Then handle it. With that, he turned once more and disappeared into the dark, leaving behind only the hum of low generators and the thick silence of subordinates unsure whether they just witnessed a reprimand or a warning. Emerson Street Exchange. A convoy of Class A commercial vehicles rumbled down Emerson Street, engines grumbling low beneath the heavy dusk. The lead truck bore the unmistakable glint of unauthorized freight, its container sealed, armored, and tagged only with a spray-painted sigil of a hawk in mid-dive. Inside the cab, Martin Maxwell sat with one hand on the wheel and the other wrapped around the grip of a pistol laid casually across his thigh. He was a cool figure, in motion-trimmed beard, dark sunglasses, and a wristwatch worth more than the truck behind him. The shipment, though unregistered, was no street hustle. These were military-grade weapons bound for a meeting with the Washington Street families. Behind him, 3 more trucks followed in formation, each driven by hardened men loyal to Maxwell's cause. Then contact 3 vans screeched out from alleyways ahead, tires screaming on old concrete. Masked gunmen spilled out, faces hidden behind bandanas and scarves. No insignias, but no mystery either. Rain's brothers thugs. Out for blood or bounty, maybe both. Gunfire lit the street. One of Maxwell's men dropped instantly. Another was clipped, trying to take cover behind the second truck. Bullets sparked off bumpers and broke glass. A makeshift ambush, dirty and fast. Maxwell ducked out of the cab, returning fire with sharp precision. He dropped 2 attackers with center mass shots, but had to roll behind a curb barrier as rounds snapped overhead. "They re-hitting the drop," one of his crew shouted from behind a rear wheel. "It's the Rain's fucking street gang." Maxwell gritted his teeth. "Then let's give them something to choke on." The firefight grew more intense. Outnumbered, the defenders began to falter until help arrived. Boots thundered against the pavement. A squad of 217th MM 5 troops stormed in from the east flank, weapons up and precision sharp. At the front, Lieutenant Doyon Rand. He moved like something out of legend, fast, surgical, fearless. Rand weaved through open fire, slamming an elbow into one attacker and hurling him into a truck grill. In one smooth motion, he drew his sidearm and dropped a second thug through the neck. No wasted movement. No hesitation. Maxwell saw it all while reloading behind the trailer. Another wave of Rain soldiers rounded the corner. This one heavier shotguns and heavy armor. A second ambush. Maxwell stood to meet them. He held his own close-quarter scuffles, ducking and firing, punching when ammo ran dry, but he was clearly outpaced by Rand. Where Maxwell was calculating, Rand was instinctual, a blur of rage and rhythm. Knife, sidearm, elbow, sweep. One man down, another gutted, a third screamed before a rifle butt silenced him. Reinforcements from the 217th arrived seconds later. They swept the alley and pushed the final wave of attackers back into retreat. Sirens wailed in the far distance, delayed. As usual, when it was over, bodies lay strewn like scattered gear. Maxwell limped slightly, holding his ribs. Rand stood tall, pipe in mouth, wiping blood from his knuckles with a strip of someone's scarf. He turned to Maxwell. "That's some mighty fine hardware you moving along these here corridors, young man." Maxwell, catching his breath, half laughed. "Is that an FN FAL with a scope?" Rand smirked. "Sure is. Haven't seen one of those since Inkster." "You served in the ink?" "No, but I got a niece. Her father was killed in the ink. I'm pretty much taking care of her and her mother now." Rand's eyes lingered on him for a moment, calculating. Then, "I'm no baby killer. Had a friend bring a few of these back, though." Maxwell gave a slow nod. "Looks like you know your way around a gun. And you don't know your way around a hot zone. You were lucky we were running patrol." Maxwell chuckled, wiping soot from his face. A 217th sergeant approached. "Lieutenant, reinforcements are holding the perimeter. Trucks are clear." Rand gave a nod, then turned back to Maxwell. "You lost a few good men. We'll run escort on the rest of this shipment." Maxwell looked surprised. "That's appreciated." Rand pointed to 2 of his soldiers. You, replace his drivers, get that freight where it's going." The 217th soldiers immediately moved toward the trucks, checking bodies and gear, then loading up. Maxwell looked back at Rand. "You're a pretty interesting motherfucker," he said. Rand took one final puff from his pipe. "You got like a business card or something?" Maxwell reached into his jacket and handed him a sleek black card. "Red Hawk." No words. Rand pocketed it. "Nice bird. She flies when called." Rand began to walk away, boots crunching broken glass. "Try not to die before we speak again," he called back. Maxwell grinned, wiping blood from his lip. "No promises." Chapter 4. Whistles in the Keyhole. 14 cycles have passed since a migration sparked inquiry into the educational doctrine of an entire state. That many cycles since the economic backbone class of that region became sick and tired of being sick and tired. The state of Kalamazoo, fractured and volatile, now pulsed to the cadence of new leadership. Once a bureaucrat with ink-stained fingers and a sanitized desk at the indoctrination board, Dr. Emmeline Cast had reemerged under a different banner entirely. Governor. His ascension was less a campaign and more a consolidation. Backed by the Azurite bloc, buoyed by corporate logistics and private militia interests, Cast took office with promises of ethical continuity and re-education realignment. His smile was sterile, his handshake practice. But beneath the tailored suits and policy briefings, old truth still stirred. At one of the few areas left in Kalamazoo designated as a non-battle zone, off the Douglas Highway, near the Proxmire River, the 40 Winks complex glittered across the frozen waterfront like a gem too polished to trust. Once a drive-in theater near the Highland Hills, it had since become something far more: offices, embassies, restaurants, a luxury hotel, and an entire legislative hub for non-aligned parties. One of the most politically neutral ground in the state. But neutrality was a myth. And myths, in times like these, were dangerous. On the 19th floor, behind frosted glass etched with the sigil of the Citrine House, Erica Burns stared across her office at Councilor Van Syck. Her posture was composed, upright in a cream blazer, her notes aligned perfectly in front of her on the conference table. She did not smoke, she did not curse, but her eyes, sharp and amber, hinted at storms beneath the stillness. This wasn't some junkie looking for salvage, she said quietly. They took servers, whole towers. No vandalism, no spray tags, just targeted data pulls. Syck stood at the wide glass pane behind her, arms folded, watching traffic flicker below like veins of light in a sleeping beast. "And you recertain the janitorial staff wasn't involved?" he asked. She nodded once. I checked twice. The only person with proximity clearance after hours was a third-party cleaner assigned by hotel rotation, 40 Wink staff, not ours. Syck tapped 2 fingers against the side of his coat, thinking. Then, and what did he see? Not much, she admitted. A figure, 24 minutes past EOS, said they moved like they belonged. No mask, no rush. Walked straight into the Citrine data vault and out again. The cameras cut out for 42 seconds. Syck's brow furrowed. 42 seconds. That's long enough to copy intel, run a back door, or switch out drives entirely. Burns nodded again. And if you know which servers to pull, that's a lot of leverage in very little time. Syck turned from the window and approached the table. His voice lowered. And you believe Cast authorized it? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she let silence fill the space between them, like a slow fog curling through concrete. I believe, she said finally, the break-in was professional. I believe it was politically motivated. And I believe the Raines brothers don't move without someone above them handing down a nod. Sex's jaw tightened. You don't say they name lightly. I don't say it publicly at all. They locked eyes. She continued, softer now. I've seen some of the pooled system logs. The server access keys match old formatting from his days at the indoctrination board. He didn't even bother masking the encryption string. It's either arrogance or a message. Cass doesn't do messages, Syck said. He does control. From beyond the walls, the hum of the 40 Winks complex drifted faintly elevator chimes, the distant murmur of a lobby piano, someone laughing too loudly at a cocktail bar 2 floors down. Inside, however, the air was weighty, still. Burns folded her hands. I'm going to file a formal grievance through the Inter-Party Ethics Tribunal, she said. Syck nodded. Do it, but keep your tone soft. If Cass smells fear, he'll chase it. If he smells resolve, he'll bury it. Erica looked back at the glass. I don't fear him. No, Syck said, walking to the door. But you should fear who he trusts. He paused before exiting. And Erica, if this gets worse and it will don't wait for permission to protect what's yours. He left her alone, the door sign shut behind him. Erica Burns turned to the window, where the 40 Winks logo glowed faintly against the snowfall, and whispered under her breath, "He already took what's mine." On the lower levels of a warehouse bustling with shady activity, the hierarchy of an individual's relevance on a floor of thousands could be deduced upon observation. Those assigned with the hardest of tasks, the heaviest of lifting, were obviously the lowest in level. Those that loitered about drinking, smoking, partying, shirking, leaving the more difficult tasks to the lower level, were obviously higher in tier. Even higher in relevance than they, supervisors, watching with a diligent eye, but neglectful in their own tasks, only working enough to see to it that the quotas were filled and shipments were moved. But there was an upper level of this warehouse as well, where only the high tier of those on the floor were allowed to access. That's where the nice lounges were. That's where the good parties took place. That's where the boardrooms and offices could be found. In the nicest office of all, on that upper level, complete with a bar and its own indentured waitress. In front of a desk sit Coster, a couple of mid-level members of the Raines Brothers organization, and a bald-headed miscreant in blue jeans and a Franklin Championship jersey. An expensive bottle of brandy, halfway finished, set on that desk. Behind that desk, in a leather chair, the nicest chair of them all, sat a shadowy figure enthralled in a phone conversation over the loudspeaker. At the edge of that desk lay a sword blade, long, curved, forged black, with a strange humming edge that sliced through the darkness. "You won the last election by a hair, Governor. In order to secure your re-election, I thought it would be best to extract information from the Citrine Party database. They're not as involved in this conflict as the Jaspers and Azurites. Therefore, their offices were easier to penetrate. We have enough access of registered voters amongst their party now to begin manipulation operations to sway their ballots towards us." "Sounds good to me," Dr. Cass replied, his voice smooth but stilled. "I've successfully passed the State Security Coordination Act, which puts the police and National Guard under my direct control. I've also passed the Public Records Secrecy Act. Now spies and journalists will have less access to important documents." He paused just long enough for the implications to settle. "You keep playing your hand, I'll keep playing mine. Over the past few years, we've built ourselves a quiet little balance of power." A faint hum came over the line, followed by the soft click of keystrokes. "You should be receiving the next deposit now." "I have it on my screen," the shadow replied evenly. Then, without ceremony, goodbye for now. Pouring himself another glass of brandy, Costa turned to the bald-headed man in the Franklin jersey and said, "Frederick Dixon, the next time you come back from the Yak, please bring more cases of this brandy." "It is excellent. We hijacked a truck from the Wolverine Brewing Company. We still have a few cases left. If you'd like, for a pretty penny," he smiled. Everyone from the front side of the desk could hear the conversation, but there was no one behind the desk but the shadow. If there were anyone behind the desk, they might be able to see a computer screen, they might be able to see the confirmation of a deposit into an account, and they might be able to see the name on the account. The name was LaRon Raines. The hallway outside General Shepard's office smelled faintly of polish and gourmet coffee. Inside, 3 figures loitered, not for strategy briefings or supply reports, but because General Shepard's secretary had a way of making boredom look like an opportunity. "I would drink her bath water," Llewellyn muttered, adjusting his collar like it might help him stand taller. "Next time we get a furlough, I'm going to ask if she wants to go to the Coral Gables with me." "You think you soldier enough? You spend a lot of time on bitch duty stacking up papers and sharpening pencils while that leg of yours healed?" Rand replied dryly, arms folded, boots kicked up on a supply crate. "Shit," James Howell laughed. "Don't be mad at Lou because you're too old and married to be hanging out at the local bar scene with hot chicks." Rand smirked, but didn't deny it. "My age gives me experience over you, my young computer geek friend. And as far as marriage goes, my principles are steeped in pears. My pair of eyes and my pair of balls." They all laughed, Llewellyn grinned. Keep talking, Lieutenant Rand. I'll remind your wife what happened in them drills at Camp Osborne. That accidental back touch. Before Rand could fire back, the secretary herself poked her head out, cool as frost. Excuse me, Lieutenant Rand, she said. You have a call on line 2. A Ruby Jean. Rand straightened immediately. Thank you, Major. He slipped into the adjacent comm room, shut the door, and pressed his thumb to the receiver. The voice on the other end was weathered velvet. Hey, bruh, it's baby sis. What's going on, Kip? He said, settling into the seat. Ain't heard from home in a while. Everything all right? I'm getting by. Amberson dropped by with some groceries. Brought me that sweet mint tea I like. Rand nodded. She's always been the thoughtful one. That's why I married her. Well, don't tell Mum that. She still doesn't like her. Mum's still spoiling Job. Mum's still spoiling everybody. Listen. Job's trying out for the polar bears. Rand's tone shifted, warmth in his chest. Well, he's got the arm for it. He's got the heart for it. And he's keeping his head down. That's all I care about. Before Rand could reply, a loudspeaker chimed overhead. All officers and command staff report to the main mess. Immediate assembly. Rand exhaled. Duty calls Kip. I'll call back soon. You better. And Doyon, be careful. Something else in the air. The line clicked. Mess Hall 217th. MM5 base. The room filled fast. Soldiers, officers, medics, everybody who still bled for the cause packed in, some with meals half eaten, others still in flight gear. The chatter died down as General Shepard stepped to the front. His face was stone. Effective immediately, he began, we are elevating to tier red conflict readiness. A wave of murmurs cut through the room. The governor's recent legislation has rerouted weapons shipments statewide. We are officially outgunned. We've confirmed multiple national crime syndicates entering local conflict zones. Civilians are now targeted. Our job has changed. He held up a data pad, red lit with urgency. Legislatively, it would be difficult to restock weapons and ammo from our armories. We fight with what we have. Non-military allied factions would have an easier job weaponizing than we would at this point. Less paperwork. MM540 1st Jasper House District representatives are doing their due diligence to shift tides more in our favor. A low rumble of tension moved through the ranks. What once was us assisting non-military factions in this conflict is slowly becoming the non-military factions protecting us, but they as well are running low on weapons. One of the A5 officers from the 5th row asked, couldn't some of the non-military factions be militarized, sir? The question was so innocent and naive, Shepard noticed one of his superiors to his side smirk. Shepard rolled his eyes at the arrogance of that superior officer, though be it out of his line of sight. Well, son, Shepard replied, for one, Alpha Psi would never green light it. A lot of these guys have extensive criminal backgrounds. And secondly, that would legally make them military entities, which falls into the jurisdiction of the governor's legislation. Due to legalities beyond our control, Washington Street families and associations like them are now the front line of this operation. The question is, how do we get them the proper weapons to fight where we can't? Then, from the 3rd row, Rand slowly raised a black card with a crimson hawk etched into it. He said, I know a guy, Port Doe Province, in the city of Conant Jordan, near Wexford and Nevada. At the Sanders Blunt Ballroom, Martin Maxwell hosted a celebration for 2 young progenies. Martin Prince Maxwell, his namesake nephew, and Angles Maxwell Jones, the beautiful daughter of his beautiful younger sister, 5 years ago. They were born on the same day cycle, Prince at the Crown Light and Angelus at Virgewake. 25 Y clan of life entitled them to new rites of passage. Families, corporations, and clans from all over Port Doe Province came bearing gifts. Maxwell was not so pleased when one of his young A1s gently tapped him on the shoulder, disrupting him from the festivities. "What? You have a phone call, sir? Can't you see I'm busy?" The A1 replied, "From the Hawk line, sir," he emphasized. "Oh, I have a comm truck outside. You can patch it there." Excusing himself from the table, he went outside to receive the call. "Maxwell, it's Rand. How's the world looking back home? A lot different from out there, I imagine." "What's on your mind, brother? We've got a situation that could use your expertise. Legislation up here has made it difficult for us to weaponize. However, entities such as your very own do well in this climate. We need you to help secure armaments for some of our factions up here to aid in the fight. Could you throw us a bone?" "Funny you mention that," Maxwell replied. "Some rivals of mine have been traveling back and forth up there. Woven Frayz Syndicate. You may or may not have heard of them. Mystic fuckers. Dents and coders. Putting a hurting on my pockets." "Never heard of." E.M. Rand replied. "Well, they have definitely heard of Kalamazoo. They've been back and forth with some sort of cargo that I'm not sure about, but I'll be glad to find out about the weaponry that I don't know about involving my rivals that you don't know about. I'm going to get back to this party that you don't know about and offer this phone call that government agencies definitely don't know about. And I look forward to a deposit in my account from this conversation that nobody knows about. You dig?" "Indeed," Rand replied, grinning, with a pipe in between his teeth. Part 6. Chapter 5. Battle Creek Abandoned Depot, Upton Avenue. The depot was half buried in windblown salt and rust. Steel bones of locomotives, long gone, jutted up like ribs from the frozen ground. Night had draped itself over the scene, broken only by the glare of vehicle lamps and the steady clank of cargo being unloaded. Martin Maxwell, coat buttoned to the throat and gloves soaked from the cold, stood beside the final crate as it was lowered off the bed of the truck. His breath fogged the air as he handed a manifest tablet to one of the 217th officers, a hard-faced sergeant bearing the insignia of General Curtis Shepard's C Command. "Crate 13 completes the ledger," the sergeant confirmed, "courtesy of the 217th Trust and some discretionary signatures." Maxwell nodded once. General Shepard's courtesy is noted. Across the lot, members of the Washington Street families move with quiet efficiency, no flash, no chatter, just the low rhythm of crate runners and the occasional crack of a pry bar splitting seals. One of the family capos, watching over the proceedings with a suspicious eye, broke the silence first. "Governor's been making it hell lately, choking off supply lanes, bringing in all these outside hands. Cats we ain't never dealt with before. Different language, different vibe." Maxwell didn't respond. He knew better than to feed complaints. Another Washington family's rep, this one wearing a scarf wound tight around his face, gestured toward the alley behind the depot. "Heard talk from a few of our people in Arcadia. Word is, pets are going missing. Dogs, mostly. Found them strung up in garages, bled out, insides rearranged like art pieces." A third chimed in from behind a barrel fire. "Same thing happened by the old plaza on Cedar. 2 pit bulls, drained, pinned to the wall with broken coat hangers. Weird symbols drawn on the pavement. Chalk, no tags, no scent." The first capo looked over his shoulder. "Some say the ones responsible got ties to the Silver Domes in Yaktown, but no one knows their names. They don't speak unless they need something. They move like priests and ghosts." That caught Maxwell's attention. He exhaled, slow and deliberate. "You ain't dealing with priests," he said flatly. "You dealing with old world vultures," meaning, "Where I am from, those rituals ain't just for show. They're markers, land claims, and the only people bold or crazy enough to tag with blood are Woven Frayz Syndicate." The names hung in the air like frost. The capos exchanged glances. One of them squinted. "Never heard of them. That is because you weren't supposed to," Maxwell replied. "They don't advertise. They infiltrate. They play in blood and fog and doctrine. Their roots run through the occult understructure of the East Provinces, and if they were marking ground here, He pointed to the depot floor, then slowly swept his finger across the night horizon. Then they've already walked your streets. You just haven't noticed yet. The sergeant from the 217th tightened his gloves and stepped forward. General Shepard S. Files mentioned foreign syndicate movement, but never this name. You saying this ain't T-local? I'm saying they ain't just smugglers or mystics, Maxwell answered. They recodus adept territorial agents. They don't move unless it serves their design. The family capo muttered. Design for what? Maxwell met his gaze. Domination. Through faith, fear, or fire. Sometimes all three. The wind howled between the train skeletons. No one said anything for a moment. Then the family capo jerked his chin toward the crates. We appreciate the drop. We'll handle the rest. Make sure you do, Maxwell said. Don't play with ghosts you don't understand. He stepped into the idling truck cab without another word. The engine roared and the convoy pulled into the night. Conference room, 19th floor, 40 Winks Complex, Kalamazoo, Tuesday. Vergewake hours. A soft frost rimmed the window panes of Erica Burns' office as muted sunlight filtered in through the branded glass of the 40 Winks sigil. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the encrypted conference link vibrating through the long, bone-white conference table. At the head, Erica sat composed, shoulders square beneath a citrine gold shawl. The large screen embedded in the wall displayed multiple delegates from the MM541st Jasper House District, their insignias pixelating under intermittent signal strain. Most were mid-level party reps. Some were veterans of the floor wars in Alphason, and one, central and sharp-eyed, was District Councilor Van Seck, remote from a secure site near the Hastings Civic Commons. Thank you for making the time, Erica began. Let's be direct. The governor's latest legislation has compromised both military operations and civilian protections. This isn't just politics anymore. This is destabilization. Councilor Seck steepled his fingers. I take it you referring to the new statewide Logistics Act and the reclassification clause for armed factions? Burns nodded. Both. And the Security Transparency Exemption Order. Combined, they give CAS unilateral control over data flow, arms shipments, and public assembly. It cripples us. It cripples the 217th. And it cripples everyone who isn't Azerite aligned. A younger rep from Jasper chimed in. The public is spooked. They recalling for stability, not legalese. Which is why we framed this as a security stabilization bill, Erica said coolly. What I'm proposing is simple. A bipartisan federal override bill crafted in Alphason but enforceable across all MM5 jurisdictions. It triggers when state-level governance conflicts with inter-party ethical law. Another delegate frowned. You re-asking for federal teeth. You'll need jasper, citrine, and at least half a lepidolite or jade house. We already have 23 lepidolite votes pending, she countered, and 12 jade contingents who've been stonewalled by CASIS restrictions on relief missions in the River Oaks County. They reopened. Seck leaned forward. And what do you want from the 41st? A formal cosign. I want Jasper House on the record as supporting the Sovereign System Stabilization Act. We bring this into the upcoming Alphason General Assembly. If we win the floor vote, it sets a precedent. It forces independent review of the governor's entire legislative catalog. There was silence. Then Seck spoke. You know, this L paint a target on your back. It's already there, she said. This just makes it official. A beat passed. Then nods began appearing across the screen. We'll draft language tonight, Seck confirmed. Jasper House will stand with you. Erica allowed herself the smallest smile. Then we just changed the rules. The feed ended. Erica turned slowly back to the frost-lined window where the city of Kalamazoo flickered faintly below like a patient gasping between breaths. Somewhere out there, Martin Maxwell was arming the street. Somewhere else, Doyon Rand was holding the line with tired men in few rounds. And in here, she was lighting a match in the powder room. The paper prophets of the Lower East. The wind had no sympathy that morning. It cracked through the bones of the lower east like a warning, carrying the taste of copper and road salt. On the corners of Douglas and Parsons, members of the Washington Street families moved between bundled civilians, slipping folded papers into tired hands. There was something new about the citizenry these days, something in their eyes, a sort of laze, a blissful calm, somewhat a trance. The Washington Street capos didn't shout, they didn't chant, they just handed them out silently, steadily, like offerings at a funeral. The paper was thick, printed in matte black ink, with no organization listed. At the top, in jagged font, "What has been stolen cannot be hidden forever." Below it, a grainy depiction of the Governor's seal altered. The usual balanced triangle was split down the center, oozing static and flame. In place of the motto, "Redecation is erasure." Inside the pamphlet, diagrams of known legislation, timelines, military reassignments, surveillance charts, an entire side-by-side comparison of what had changed since Cass had taken the governor's chair. Some read it right there, hands trembling. Some folded it, hid it in coat linings. Some tossed it into the gutter like it burned to hold it. But still, the Washington Street family handed more. Not a word was spoken. A patrol car passed slow. One of the figures paused, waited. No one ran. A window rolled down and an officer scanned the scene with a long stare. Then the car rolled forward again, engine low. In a shadowed alcove across from the square, a watcher in plain clothes muttered into a mouthpiece, his eyes fixed on the scene. Confirmed. Washington families active again. Material circulation underway. Orders? No response came. Only silence and the faint hiss of an open line. 204th MM5. Kalamazoo Central Division Headquarters. Pavilion Township. It's official, sir. Chemical tests from the 31st MM5 Genesee Central Division have verified it. A young corporal stood stiffly as he handed a data sheet to the sergeant major. Some sort of narcotic. Raines brothers have been selling it all over the state. The sergeant major squinted at the page. How is it they found this information before we did? They've got some sort of potion maker working for them, sir, the corporal replied. According to him, it's some kind of intoxicant, unlike anything we've seen before, actually infused somehow with Codost. I admit, I don't know much about it myself, sir. He paused, glancing down at the printout again. This stuff is popping up all over the country. Yaktown, Romulus, Conat, Jordan, Flint. Just in the news the other day, a senator's daughter up in Alphason had a bad reaction to this stuff. It almost killed her, sir. The sergeant major frowned. No mention of this from Shepard or the 217th. No reports filed? No, sir. The 31st from Genesee were the first ones on it. He hesitated, then added, some sort of sensory deprivation narcotic. People are getting hooked, and they re-getting hooked fast. The sergeant major's eyes narrowed. Whoever this potion maker is from the 31st, send a bottle of champagne with my compliments. He turned, already reaching for a terminal. I want you to forward memos to the 217th, the 194th, and every other district, office, news outlet, intelligence agency, or swinging dick out there. I want eyes on this thing. He paused again, considering. I wonder if this ties to those Silverdome guys or that Maxwell fella. Likely not, sir, the corporal said. Maxwell's been a helping hand with the Washington Street families ever since the governor bled us dry on weapons. The sergeant gave a low grunt, tapping the data slate once with his knuckle. Even still track every lead. If Kodos's been weaponized, we've got more than politics to worry about. Kalamazoo, the governor's mansion. Late into the hours. Governor Dr. Emerlin Cass returned to his estate room from the kitchen with a plate of sliced pears and a small wedge of midnight cheese. The halls were silent, trimmed in dim amber light, the kind that gave shadows long fingers. He moved slowly, not tired, but thoughtful. Pausing at the bookshelf across from his fireplace, he ran his hand over a row of unmarked audio tapes. Private tapes, tapes of public record. Not many knew of these tapes. Fewer still understood what was actually recorded on them. He pulled one, second from the left. Black reel, no label. He fed it into the deck by habit, not hesitation. The machine clicked. Word. He pressed play. If they get wind of this in Ingham, Governor, they'll have my head. I have no part of this. Wait, what are you doing? No, no, no. Caius grinned faintly and pressed fast forward, holding the pear slice in his teeth as the spool spun with mechanical precision. He waited, then pressed play again. You won the last election by a hair, Governor. In order to secure your re-election, I thought it would be best to extract information from the Citrine Party database. They're not as involved in this conflict as the Jaspers and Azurites. Therefore, their offices were easier to penetrate. We have enough access to registered voters amongst their party now to begin. Click. He shut it off with a grin, then casually fast-forwarded further. He stopped. Press play again. We, at Rovere Hadonis Syndicate, are more in tune with Kodos than other factions under your umbrella. That's what gives us the power to guarantee to you we can win you favor amongst the entire state, amongst the entire nation. Not by force, but by turning the population into willing participants, puppets at the whim of your fingers. The deck gave a soft static pop. He pressed stop, smiled wider this time. He walked to the window, looked out over the darkened city of Kalamazoo, its steeples and scaffolded towers like chess pieces on a board no one else could see. The governor left the plate on the nightstand, didn't touch the cheese. He slid under his covers and let silence hold him. He slept well. Chapter 6. Glazed Eyes in Highland Park. Highland Park Province, state of Wayne. Saturday, Polar Bears Field, tryout day. The field was cracked, patchy with thawed-out winter grass and uneven clay, but the young hopefuls didn't seem to care. They were lined up under an early spring sun, their breath still fogging lightly from the morning chill. Aluminum bats clanged, mitts popped, whistles blew. Joe Brand stood among them. He was tall for his age, lanky, quick-wristed, and born with a smooth left-handed swing that had made him a neighborhood legend back in Finkel Acres. But today, something was off. His shoulders slumped, his eyes barely focused. He swayed lightly in place as though he were listening to a song no one else could hear. From the chain-link fence at the third base line, Amberson Moran watched with hopeful eyes, fingers clasped tightly around a steaming cup of coffee. She wore her long coat open at the front, curls tucked under a beanie, her breath shallow with nerves. It had taken her and Job almost an hour on the Oakman Freeway to get to Highland Park, and she'd noticed it then, the way he barely answered questions, the slow, drifting way his head turned when she spoke, like his mind was stuck behind a foggy window. "You okay, baby?" she had asked earlier. "Yeah," he demurred, not a blink, not a smile. Now, on the field, a coach called out, "Okay, Joe, to the plate. Let's see what you got." He ambled to the batter's box, picked up the bat, held it like it was foreign to him. The pitcher wound up, whiff, a hollow strike. Another ball came in, whiff, off balance, his feet tangled. From the bleachers, a few other players chuckled. One of the coaches raised a brow. Amberson stood up halfway, squinting. "Come on, baby, keep your eye on it." Near her, folding her arms tight over a navy fleece, Ruby Jean Rand shifted her gaze. Younger than Amberson, but with the wisdom of someone who'd seen more than her share. Her thick braids framed sharp eyes trained by hours in the cadaver labs at Wayne State, years of late-night clinic rotations, and a nose for when something wasn't right. She leaned in toward her sister-in-law. "Bungie," she said softly. Amberson looked over. Only Ruby Jean and Doyon ever called her that, a throwback to when they would party at the Ernie D's ballroom. The way she danced was like bouncing on a bungee cord. "What is it?" "He's high." The words landed like a slap. What? No, he is just nervous. This is a big day for him. Ruby Jean didn't look away. His pupils are tight, coordination's off, mouth's dry. You ain't seen it before, but I have. On the field, Job swung again and stumbled. The coach waved him off gently, not cruelly, but with the practiced disappointment of someone who'd seen talent burn out too soon. Amberson's hand flew to her mouth. Ruby Jean's voice was lower now. I seen a couple kids in the clinic last month with that same glaze. Some new shit floating around. Kodos lace? Maybe. They call it blink or hush or some other cute name, but it eats at 'em quick. Amberson whispered, almost to herself. But how? When? Why would he? That's what we gonna find out, Ruby Jean said, already standing. But first we get him home. Then we make some calls. And you best brace yourself, Bungie. Because if he got it from school, from the street, or from someone who should know better, we not just fighting a bad batch. We fighting back. Amberson nodded slowly. Her hands were trembling. Kip, please don't tell your mother about this. Ruby Jean placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. Come on. Aunt Ruby S. got him. Together, they started walking. Far behind them, Job Rand sat alone on the edge of the dugout bench, staring at his palms like they were someone else's hands. State of Kalamazoo, Texas Township, the front line, from the lead helicopter's cockpit, in a fleet of blue 325th MM5 Chinooks. Commander P. Thompson could see the whole theater, hundreds of thousands down there. Through the smoke and the haze, his heads-up display made it more easy to identify friend from foe. He saw allies. Of course, the ground forces from his battalion, the 325th, but he can identify other allies as well. The 989th of Northern Genesee, the 437th of Washtenaw, of course the Rains brothers, some silver domes down there, a few strange-looking guys, blue cloaks. But he could also see adversaries from up there. Looked like weapons from the Washington Street families gave off the greatest heat signatures. He could see the 31st from Genesee Central, the 217th, the 194th from Port-au-Prince. On the ground, however, a totally different story. Smoke so thick you could cut it with a knife and put it on a plate. James Howe, technical specialist with the 217th, had just entered a comms truck and cracked the driver's head wide open as he accessed their mobile terminal. Several battalions were assigned the task to hold the north point of the line. In order to do so, however, they needed information. Enemy numbers for the sector, enemy locations for the sector, enemy movements for the sector. Doyon Rand and Llewellyn laid down covering fire as he combed through the logs. General Shepard and his superior from the 217th, along with Drake Call, head general of Genesee Central's 31st, relayed orders from the forward command post. This special unit, however, was commanded from the tactical command post led by Hank Voss of the 194th, relatively close to the Rand family manor back in the Provence of Port-d'Eau. I've got it, said Howe. We got 14 buses of enemy personnel coming in from the east. Let's get ready to fight, Rand shouted. Lou, get on the horn with the Washington Street families. See if they can send us some firepower to suppress these bastards. No reply from the Washington Street families as the convoy of buses emerged. The 217th could have used the help of the Washington Street families, but just like latrine duty, it wasn't pretty, but it was efficient. Overhead, helicopters hum. At that moment, something inside Doyon snapped. One of the helicopters arced, preparing for another flyby as he stood motionless. James Howe and Llewellyn glanced at each other, confused. They heard him say, Henry fucking Higgins. Lieutenant, you okay? Llewellyn said. Then he just started running towards the helicopter. Lieutenant, our orders are to hold the line. All they could hear was Rand saying, just you wait, Henry Higgins, just you wait. He's gone fucking bananas. Hank Voss observed with a curious eye, wondering why was one of his soldiers breaking the line. Then suddenly, Rand leaped 30 feet into the air as the helicopter opened fire on him. He punched his fist through the windshield. Commander P. Thompson must have shit himself right there. I knew you weren't just an A-10, he shouted. Rand grabbed for the controls, pulling them toward him, and the helicopter swerved. Henry Higgins, down you go, Henry Higgins. Rand had become a madman. On its side, the helicopter crash landed, but both men emerged unscathed. Little birdie like shitting in fields, huh? Rand bellowed. I'm feeling all clogged up now. You're just a laxative I need, replied Pete Thompson. Thrust, counter, parry, strike. No more than 20 seconds passed before the conclusion. Lieutenant Rand crushing Commander Thompson's trachea. As he fell back, Rand spat and whispered, "For Lewis, bitch," then returned to the line. Back at the 217th Forward Operation Base, Rand Llewellyn and James Howe sat in the hallway outside of a conference room. Howe bickered at Rand. "I don't know what the fuck we're doing here. You're the one that left the line," carefully watching the door as General Shepard stepped out. They saw Shepard's superior on the other side of the door and an older officer that they didn't recognize as the door closed behind Shepard. "Beginning immediately, Rand, you're on a probationary period," Shepard said as his superior left the conference room. An odd figure still lingered inside. Shepard's superior gave him a look not so friendly of an eye as he walked away. Shepard rolled his eyes and continued. "That being said, is somebody interested in meeting the three of you boys? His name is Hank Voss. He's from the 194th. As the three of them filed into the conference room, Hank Voss sat on the other side of the table, a sort of mellow look about him. Without introducing himself, he began, "As I sat in that tactical command post looking at you guys through my binocs, I liked the way you boys move. But then I saw you, Lieutenant Rand, jump on that helicopter, and as I stood there with my jawline on the goddamn floor, not because you've jumped 30 feet, I've seen shit like that countless times, I began to wonder, what did that helicopter do to make that guy so fucking mad?" He said with a scary grin at his lower cheeks. "It was a small personal gripe, sir." "You broke my line over a personal gripe?" Sir Rand explained. "Never mind," Voss interrupted. "I've been going over your files. It says you guys are pretty close to Northwest back at the Provence. Why join the 217th? Why not the 313th or the 194th? I don't know about these fellas, sir, but I enlisted to get away from my family." Voss chuckled as he bit into his cigar. "Blue Van Gospel, Yaktown, state of Oakland." The lush ballroom swayed under the weight of its own legend. A former opera house turned club. Its ceilings rose cathedral high, trimmed in blue-gold neon that pulsed to bass lines born in the belly of the streets. The smoke wasn't cigarette smoke, not anymore, but something hazier, laced with Kodos lace wax and the euphoric burn of imported flame dust from Conat Jordan. Frederick Dixon grinned like a man who owned the building, which, in a way, he did. One of the senior members of the Silver Domes of Yaktown, he walked in loops around the velvet booths, a bottle of Vontel Gold hanging from 2 fingers, half-button Franklin Championship jersey clinging to his frame. Blue jeans stiff with new denim, combat boots loud on the marble stairs. Someone shouted something about the Hedonist Syndicate cat scene Arcadia doing rituals behind the plaza again, hanging chicken bones in the rain, tagging chalk symbols. Someone else said one of the capo's daughters got married in a bathtub last weekend. Dixon laughed. Maybe, maybe not. By the time he hit the alley out back, the night was already collapsing around him. His head buzzed like static. The cold slapped his teeth. He stumbled once on the sidewalk, caught himself against a rusted fence. "Those damn syndicate boys," he mumbled, "fishing for his van keys. They really know how to party." Pike Street was dark when he pulled in the blue van, wheezing like an asthmatic giant. 3rd floor, back corner. 2 windows taped at the corners. Porch light busted. The place didn't look like much, but it was his. He fumbled with the lock twice, missed the handle once, and finally kicked the door open just enough to wedge himself inside. The apartment was still, dark, quiet. "Rhea," he called, voice slurring, "I brought leftover wings. I think." No answer. He turned a corner and nearly tripped over a shoe. The lamp was knocked over. Something about the air felt off. His high drained out of him like water from a cracked tub. "Rhea?" He found her curled in the hallway, halfway between the laundry closet and her bedroom, one leg twisted beneath her, face tilted sideways, lips cracked and pale. His old Walt Whitman high school jacket hung off her like a flag at half-mast. At first he thought she was sleeping. Then he saw the foam. "Shit, Rhea. Shit, no." He knelt, tried shaking her, slapping her cheek. Nothing. He screamed her name twice, pulled her up into his arms, staggered out the door without even locking it. The van roared awake like it knew the stakes. The tires screamed at the corner of Franklin and Pike, rolling red through a yellow light that never had a chance. Yanktown General Hospital came up fast, squat brick building lit with too many buzzers and not enough mercy. He dragged her inside, shoving past the security desk, yelling for help. A nurse took her from his arms, and suddenly she was gone behind a pair of white doors. He waited. He paced. He cursed, kicked a vending machine, and finally slumped into a chair that felt like punishment. The doctor who came out looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Thin beard, bagged eyes, clipboard under one arm. "I'm sorry, she didn't make it." Frederick stared. "What happened to her?" "We still trying to ID the compound," the doctor said. "It's some kind of synthetic depressant. Early tests show interference with Kodos pathways in the brain, like it's muting sensory feedback while ramping up dopamine and obedience response. Kids think they're refloating, but their bodies start forgetting how to breathe." "She don't even mess with that shit," Dixon muttered. "Not Rhea. She was clean." The doctor nodded slowly. "This one's new. No official name yet, but it's spreading. We've had similar cases in Flint, Conant Jordan, and out west in Elizabeth Lake. Street intel says it's coming in without packaging. Just small black vials, sometimes wrapped in blue string. We don't know who's making it." Frederick's face hardened. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small field recorder. "Say that again." "I what?" "Everything you just said. Say it again." "Sir, I am not at liberty to say it again." The recorder blinked red. Somewhere in the dark shell of Yanktown, another line had just been crossed. Dixon left the hospital with the van door half closed and the heater cranked to high. He didn't call anyone, didn't stop at the plaza, drove past Franklin and kept going. This wasn't about the silver domes anymore. This was about ghosts, poison, and a sister who used to braid his hair when they were little. This was war. The remaining portion of this document has not been listed in chapters yet, but it is the canon story of the rest of the Kalamazoo conflict to be edited and extended later. 1. Erica Burns stood in front of the large fountain in the lobby at the Dessenberg building that housed the 41st District Jade offices with a roll of coins skipping them across the fountain. Gary Brown, 41st Jade House lead representative, admired her from afar as he approached her at a medium pace from the elevator. "Erica Burns, always a pleasure. Is Van here with you? He's in traffic. He'll be here shortly. Should we head up to your office? My dear, here at Jade, we don't conduct business in the office. We conduct business at the coffee shop," pointing beyond the newsstand down the corridor. She chuckled. He turned to one of his assistants. "Wait here in the lobby for Counselor Van Seck. And when he arrives, escort him to the coffee house where we'll be waiting for him. Shall we?" He gestured Erica forward. "I was glad to see your security stabilization bill pass the House. Still got to get through the Senate, though," he said as they entered the coffee house. While doing so, he did a two-finger gesture to the barista. The barista pressed a button under the counter and a wall opened, revealing a hidden room in the back of the coffee house. Multi-partisan, no doubt, but thanks largely in part to the House of Jade. Your house has the largest population in the nation. We would have never passed without your help. The security, transparency, exemption orders. What did it for me? I don't like being out of the loop. I must confess to you, Erica, when this whole mess first began, I looked at it as a simple feud between Jade and Azurite. It baffled my mind why you, or rather the Citrine house, having so little to do with it, would involve yourself so much until I began to see the writing on the wall. A barista brought them 2 steaming cups of caf. "Best in the city," Brown said as he sniffed his cup. Pulling out a small flask, he began to pour into his caf. "Want a touch?" he offered to Erica. "No, thank you," she replied. District Councilor Van Seck entered the room, escorted by one of Brown's assistants with a cup of caf already in hand. Looking at the table at Brown's flask without asking for permission, he picked it up and poured some into his caf, grinning at Erica. "So we've passed the House, now we need the Senate. How difficult do you guys think it's going to be?" Van asked. Sipping from his cup, Brown said, "Governor Koss is monitoring everything, even in his own house. I don't take it as a sign of strength. I take it as a sign of weakness. Eventually, something will surface that we can use to rally the Senate against him." "It's interesting that you mentioned that," Erica replied, pulling out a small cassette device. She pressed play. The tape crackled. "Say that again." "I what?" "Everything you just said." "Say it again." "Sir, I am not at liberty to say it again." "This one's new. No official name yet, but it's spreading. We've had similar cases in Flint, Conant, Jordan, and out west in Elizabeth Lake. The sheriff's department says it's coming in without packaging. Just small black vials, sometimes wrapped in blue string. We don't know who's making it. Honestly, that's all I know. I wish I could tell you more, but I can't. I know where to find more information," replied a man in an agitated voice. The same voice of the agitated man, now calmer, said, "We've been getting this money, man. I love it." "Hell yeah," another voice replied. "I'm picking up another shipment from the M1 later on. What is this stuff? Where does it come from? Them cats Costner introduced us to out in Arcadia. They make this stuff, something syndicate, out of Port Doe, some sort of crew that practices the dark arts, hold weird rituals, dress funny. You know where they from? How do we get this shit into Kalamazoo so easy? They got some connects with the state, makes it easy for us to transport out there. How do they make this stuff? You're asking too many questions, man." "All right, never mind." The tape stopped. This tape showed up in my mailbox at 40 winks. No postage, just 2 words written on it. Pussy Whisperer. 2. Lieutenant Rand, on probation, gets wind of his son being high on some new sort of drug. The lieutenant convinces James Howe to hack into restricted files to gain access to more information about this drug. During this computer session, they run into their first lead. Encrypted information from the 31st MM5 Genesee Central Division Forward Operating Base in Richland, Kalamazoo. They come across a file codenamed AXE-RX, linked to a potion maker with the 31st name Philip Mitchell. Llewellyn, noting that Rand is already on probation, it wouldn't be a good idea for him to just go to the 31st base and start asking Mitchell questions about stuff that he is not supposed to know about. Llewellyn comes up with a plan, convinces James Howe to doctor up some fake logistic transfers between the 217th to the 31st base, giving them a reason to go seek out the potion maker. As they get to the base, they go about trying to locate Mitchell. During this time, they encounter Drake Call, head general of the 31st. Noticing that they have 217th patches on, he questions them about what they're doing there. They show him the mocked-up logistic order. Then Drake points them in the direction that they need to go. They continue on and eventually locate Mitchell. Mitchell, really anxious to get off of the base for a second, convinces Rand to smuggle him off base so they could talk at a bar called the Whiskey Thief. At the Whiskey Thief bar, Rand tells Mitchell about his son being high on a drug. He explains that he has a sister with ties to people that can help put together some sort of Narcan to counter against the bad effects of the drug. Mitchell, sympathetic to his son, reflects that he has a young son himself named Alfred, and he begins discussing the syndicate's new narcotic. The drug is laced with some sort of Codis pulse. A lot of drugs have Codos infusion, Llewellyn replies. Philip Mitchell retorts, yeah, but this drug has a higher density. It's more dense in Codos than anything we've ever seen before. Rand gives Mitchell an address to mail information to, covertly. They then ask Mitchell, do you need us to get you back on base? Mitchell replies, I can get myself back in base. Sneaking in is easy. You guys got in. It's getting out of there that's the hard part. Back at the 217th base, General Shepard notices computer logs attached to restricted files that no one should be accessing. Putting two and two together, he knows somehow that Rand is involved. Turning a blind eye, he deletes the keystrokes. 3. The city of Edison hadn't slept in weeks. Not since the fire started creeping across Lake Avenue, burning through storefronts, laundromats, and back alley shrines alike. Smoke hung so thick in the air that even the moon looked jaundiced. Beneath it, bodies moved like wraiths, weapons drawn, orders shouted, none of it sanctioned, all of it personal. On this night, the clash between the *** Raines Brothers Crime Organization *** and the *** Washington Street Families *** reached a new threshold. There would be no truces tonight. No politics, just violence. Long overdue and long promised. Tonight, Laurent Raines didn't send his usual enforcers. He would show up himself. 100 myths lived in the streets about him. Tonight, he wore a black overcoat with a curved obsidian blade clutched in his hand. His lieutenant, Coster, followed close behind, flanked by a squad from the ** 325th MM5 Kalamazoo Central Division ***. They moved like wolves, silent and disciplined. Ahead lay resistance. The *** Washington Street Families *** holed up near the old St. Joseph Cathedral, backed by soldiers from the *** 204th MM 5 Central Division ***. Their numbers were strong, their fortifications even stronger, but they had never faced Laurent. The wind stinks of fear, Laurent muttered, adjusting his grip on the hilt. Coster glanced around anxiously. We outnumbered them 10-1. Our numbers mean nothing, Laurent replied. Tonight we have Codost. Then, like a switchblade snapping open, Laurent surged forward. He didn't run. He times descended ***. Into a hail of gunfire, he moved like smoke. Bullets scraped skin but never slowed him. The first Jade soldier met the edge of Laurent's sword before he ever saw his eyes. With a single, silent stroke, the man's weapon and arm dropped to the pavement. The second was lifted and thrown through a window. The third screamed. Then there was no counting. Costa and the 325th burst from cover and opened fire, carving a path through the flanks. The 204th held position, but only barely. Reinforcements scrambled to reposition, shouting orders into malfunctioning radios. Inside the chaos, Laurent was cutting a ballet, blood arced in perfect rhythm. A 204th soldier raised a grenade launcher. Costa shouted, "Boss, left side, too slow." The launcher fired. Laurent leaped into the air, and with a roundhouse kick, he redirected the grenade away from him skyward before it could explode. It burst into flame midair, raining shrapnel. Laurent didn't flinch. A few soldiers did. Then they turned and ran. The *** Washington Street Families *** broke first. Their lieutenants fled toward the Cathedral Gate barricades. But Laurent was already there, kicking through the old wrought iron gates as if they were paper M-Chage. A captain from the 204th raised his sidearm, trembling. Don't come any closer. LaRon stopped. You afraid to die for Jade? I follow orders. Then follow this one, Laren said, and leveled his blade. Run. The captain did. When it was over, smoke curled from the cathedral steps. Bodies littered the courtyard, the colors of azurite and jade blending in ash. A sergeant from the 325th picked up an injured female from the Washington Street families. To the victors go the spoils, he said, as he slung her over his shoulder. Costa walked up. LaRon was crouched near the fallen banner of a Jade officer, wiping his sword clean on it. You wetted enough, boss? Costa asked. Laren didn't answer immediately, rising up as he put a cigarette in his mouth for Costa to light. He stared at the steel, watching how it shimmered with sapphire codice under the streetlight. Finally, he said, no. But the blade is remembering. And with that, he vanished into the smoke, leaving behind silence, blood, and a city unsure whether to fear him more for what he'd just done or for what came next. 4. Part 1. The barracks of the 437th Azurite Infantry Regiment in Bridgewater, Washtenaw had grown tense. It wasn't the usual tension before a deployment, nor the fatigue of long shifts guarding empty fields under gray skies. This was different. It moved quieter. Inside whispers, stares across bunks, soldiers fumbling with their gear, slower than they should be. Some jittered like their bones were vibrating beneath the skin. Others just stared at the floor. Something was wrong. The command building opened just after Reveille. The blue banner of the 437th rippled behind the raised platform. A row of officers stood in silence as the commander stepped forward, tall, grim, his voice cutting through the morning haze like a sharpened edge. As of this morning, he said, pacing before the assembled troops, 6 soldiers of this regiment have been found under the influence of an unauthorized foreign compound while on duty. No one breathed. 1 collapsed during training. 2 more were found laughing in the sentry tower while armed. Another drew on a superior officer and couldn't explain why. He let that linger. This is the 437th. We are order. We are discipline. We are the line between what this nation is and what it could descend into. The wind picked up. From here on, he said coldly, any soldier found under the influence will be stripped of rank and shipped to the rehabilitation center in Willis. No exceptions. No mercy. Whispers broke out once he stepped down. Some clenched fists. Others turned their eyes downward. The officers watched the formation with disinterest. They'd seen it before. Addiction was a quiet plague. It didn't announce itself with banners or blood. It arrived with shaking hands and dulled eyes. Later that afternoon, a 3rd platoon private failed a coordination drill. His mouth was dry, pupils dilated. They pulled him out by the arm in front of everyone. He didn't resist. By nightfall, the barracks were nearly silent. The soldiers of the 437th didn't know the name of the drug. It affected the mind like a whisper. Something that hummed in your head like a lullaby laced with power. Some said it made you feel like the universe itself was listening to you. But now, every bunk knew the command wasn't listening, and the Azurite machine would not bleed for the weak. Not in Bridgewater. Not in Washtenaw. Not in the 437th. Part 2. Collateral Clarity. A cold hush hung over the marble halls of the governor's mansion in Kalamazoo. The chandeliers had been dimmed, curtains drawn against the midnight breeze. Somewhere deep in the east wing, behind 2 layers of locked mahogany doors, Governor Dr. Emerlin Cost waited. The fire in the hearth snapped once, then silence again. A knock, 3 soft taps, precise. The governor didn't speak. He simply pressed the remote hidden in his sleeve. The doors clicked open. The man who stepped in was clothed in a long charcoal gray coat, not a wrinkle out of place. A dark blue scarf wrapped around his neck like a bandage, and behind his round glasses his eyes were unreadable. His movements were too fluid to be military, too practiced to be common. He bowed. Governor Cass, you summon. Cass stood by the fireplace, not returning the gesture. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep and too many hours listening to secret tapes. The governor growled, "It appears your product is working too well. It's beginning to touch our own." The man did not flinch, and yet I have soldiers in 325th failing duty. Officers losing edge. I have whispers of addiction in my ranks. The mysterious representative of the Rovere Hedonist Syndicate took a few casual steps forward, examining the room like a cat testing a new lair. "Collateral damage," he said softly. "With growth, there is always loss." "You call my allies collateral?" "Not your allies, Governor. Your tools. You do not lift a hammer without accepting splinters." The Kodo's rich blend is dense. It spreads through desire, not discipline. That's how it works. Carl's jaw tightened. "I can keep covering for this if the press, or worse, the Jade House starts asking questions. We already stretched thin. The Washington Street campaign is costing more than I budgeted. LaRon Raines is off his leash." At that, the syndicate representative cracked the faintest smile. "Ah, yes. The butcher of Edison. We've heard the drums, but let us be clear, we are aware of Raines, not aligned with him. His appetite serves a purpose. For now, you re-letting the fire spread just to feel the warmth? No, Governor, we are shaping the fire with precision, with rhythm, and the people, they dance in the heat willingly." Koss turned, pouring himself a measure of amber liquor. "At Yaktown? There are murmurs, leaks, voices coming from the north I didn't authorize." "Leaks," the man said, "are only dangerous when they threaten a dam. Yaktown is waterlogged, but manageable. We have ears in their wind." Kayas sipped his drink and said nothing for a while. The flames cracked again. "So tell me," Kayas muttered finally, "where does this go next?" The syndicate man adjusted his gloves, turned toward the dark window, and spoke calmly. "Everything, Governor, is going precisely to plan. Even the junkies, especially the junkies." He turned his head slightly, just enough for the firelight to catch a glint of his glasses. "Soon, there will be no distinction between the addict and the advocate. That's the future we are delivering to you." The governor didn't respond. The syndicate man didn't wait for permission to leave. With the same 3 precise steps, he disappeared into the hallway as silently as he'd arrived. Behind him, Governor Cass stood motionless, staring into the flames. Finkel Acres General Receiving Hospital. January 1978 CE. The office of Dr. Ruby Jean Rand, co-chief medical surgeon. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights filled the sterile space of Ruby Jean Rand's office. The plaque on her desk gleamed, a silent testament to years of work, dedication, and countless hours spent in operating rooms. Ruby sat beside the window, the pale afternoon light catching her features. Her eyes, sharp as ever, were fixed on the photo of her beloved dog Peanuts, perched by the corner of the desk. On the other side, her mother, Mum, smiled back at her from another framed picture, a small piece of home nestled amidst the medical degrees and notes that cluttered her workspace. Ruby's fingers idly drummed against the edge of the desk as she waited for Dr. Beverly Carson to arrive. Beverly was a sharp, methodical woman, a mind of science, someone Ruby respected but also understood could be a bit too curious for her own good. The door opened with a soft click, and Beverly stepped in, her demeanor as professional as ever. She carried a briefcase, the kind with a crisp, businesslike air about it. "Dr. Rand," Beverly greeted, offering a quick nod as she closed the door behind her. "I trust you're well?" Ruby gave her a quick smile but didn't immediately stand. "Always a pleasure, Dr. Carson. Have a seat." Beverly did so, setting her briefcase down with precision. The air between them was filled with unspoken words, the gravity of their recent work weighing on both of them. "I've finished the counteragent." Beverly said, tapping her fingers lightly on the surface of the case, the one for the drug Job was on. The effects are nearly neutralized now. I just need to work out distribution logistics, and we'll be ready. Ruby leaned back in her chair, arms folded, her eyes briefly flicking to the photo of her mother. Good. It's a step in the right direction. Beverly paused for a moment, glancing over at Ruby with a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. I've got to ask, though, the information you gave me. The mystical component of the drugs. Its chemical reaction. Where did you get it? I've never seen anything like it before. It almost feels beyond conventional science. Ruby's face remained unreadable as she met Beverly's gaze, her fingers drumming on the desk with a soft rhythm. She had expected this question, but the answer wasn't one she could easily give. I can tell you, Ruby replied with quiet finality. The source is classified. Military stuff you wouldn't understand. Beverly's brow furrowed, but she didn't push further. She knew better than the press. The answer wasn't just a polite refusal, it was a boundary Ruby had drawn long ago. Ruby's lips curled into a slight knowing smile. What you need to know is that the counteragent works. That's all that matters. Beverly nodded, accepting the explanation, but clearly unsatisfied. Still, she didn't press. Fine, she said, her voice soft but firm. I'll handle the distribution. You've done more than enough. Ruby gave her a quick nod, her thoughts already shifting elsewhere. Good. Make sure the distribution is clean. No complications. There was a beat of silence before Beverly's eyes wandered to the phone resting on Ruby's desk. Ruby noticed the glance, but didn't comment. How's Job? Beverly asked quietly, almost as an afterthought. Ruby paused, her gaze briefly flicking toward the window before returning to Beverly. He's doing fine. Better than before. That's all I'm saying. Beverly accepted that. Though the curiosity lingered in her gaze, she didn't push it any further. Instead, she straightened her posture and grabbed the handle of her briefcase. Well then, Beverly said, standing up, I'll get to work on the distribution. It shouldn't take too long. Ruby gave her a brief nod. Take care, Doctor. Carson. Beverly gave a small smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes, before exiting the office. Ruby sat there a moment longer, her thoughts drifting back to the phone, the conversation with her mother waiting in the wings, the mystery behind the formula, the classified information she had received. It was all swirling in her mind. But for now, her focus shifted. Mom had been calling all morning. It was time to catch up. She dialed her mother's number. Hey, Mom. Hey, doll. Watching Douglas on the shop floor, arguing with technicians, counting down the seconds to the end of the day. Looks like we've got a couple of birth cycle anniversaries coming up. Oh, Mom. Oh, hush, child. Douglas has us in the green this quarter. He also sold the old shop on the DeSoto Street. So I'm going to get Doyon that fancy motorcycle he's been wanting, and I've got a special gift for you. You were always spoiling us, and I always will, doll. Aren't you going to get something for Amberson? Ruby asked. Her mother audibly sighed. Look, Mom, I've got to go before the traffic on Chalfonte gets too hectic. I'll talk to you when I get back to the manor, okay? Okay, baby. Toodaloo. 204th MM5, Kalamazoo Central Division Headquarters. Llewellyn and James Howe sat to the center right of a large assembly. Lieutenant Rand a few rows behind them, right next to General Shepard and his superior officer. There was something about the morning. They had been bused from their forward operating base to the Central Division headquarters of Kalamazoo. The assembly was set up in a large aircraft hangar. It was a stage and a podium with several very important-looking figures seated in a row behind the podium. I know that's General Voss up there next to Drake Call from the 31st Genesee Central Division. Who's that guy next to him? James Howe asked Llewellyn. He's the head general of the 204th Kalamazoo Central Division. I knew his name a second ago, but I must have swallowed it without meaning to. Those other guys are from the rep offices of the 41st Jasper House. I don't know who the rest of those guys are. Something big must be going on if command put us in the same room with them, James Howe mumbled. Indeed, was Llewellyn's whispered reply. A man in a black business suit with a tan overcoat and red tie approached the podium. Good morning, troops. My name is Counselor Van Seck of the Magni Maris 540, 1st Jasper House District. A series of events has taken place overnight that demands our immediate attention. MM5, 204th Intelligence operatives have informed me that 3 hours ago, a meeting took place involving both military and political VIPs of Jasper and Citrine affiliation. As of 2.5 hours ago, that meeting was infiltrated by a coalition of Azerite-aligned military forces. Dozens of VIPs vital to our interests have been taken prisoner. Intelligence indicates strongly that they are being held in Vandercook Lake in the state of Jackson. To brief you further, here is Hank Voss Sr. of the 194th out of Port-au-Provence. Voss tapped the microphone at the podium. Good morning, as Counselor Seck informed you. A few dozen VIPs have been taken prisoner of both Jasper and Citrine affiliation. My team and I have put together an extraction plan to recover these folks and get them home. While our hopes is to recover all of our VIPs, we are well aware that the ensuing battle may result in collateral damage. Therefore, we have assembled a list of top priority VIPs. A.E. Hustis, Chief Medical Officer for the state of Kalamazoo. Nina Wing, Mayor of the city of Walden Woods. James Hofs, Union President of Local IBEW. Local 131, Phil Mitchell, Apothecary with the 31st Genesee Central Division. General Shepard noticed Doyon show subtle interest at the mention of that name. And William Coates, Kalamazoo Education Board Head. You are seated here before me now because you are the best of the best, the elite thousands amongst millions. Now, if you look to your right, my left of the assembly, you'll notice those squads in yellow uniforms. They are Citrine aligned. Some of their brothers are caught up in this mess, as are some of ours. While the bureaucrats in Alphason have given Jasper the green light, our Citrine brothers don't have that luxury. Therefore, this will be a covert operation. If any of you are captured, command will deny all knowledge of your involvement in this operation. That being said, all transport vehicles have been painted black to disguise all affiliations. If any of you choose to not involve yourselves in this operation, please leave now. Not a soul stirred. Hank Voss smiled. Make no mistake, gentlemen, I intend to put you in harm's way. I have no unrealistic expectation of all of you making it back alive. But these VIPs in enemy hands contribute to the further detriment of all that we have fought so long and so hard for. You will be suited with black uniforms. Outside of the hangar, no tags, no IDs, mount up, we leave in 7 minutes. Inside of an all-black Chinook helicopter, one of dozens, General Hank Voss, in a standing position, holding on to the overhead support bar with a chewed cigar in his mouth, further briefing General Shepard, Lieutenant Rand, Llewellyn, and James Howe on details of the mission. Our team is in charge with the recovery of Chief Medical Officer for the state of Kalamazoo. Llewellyn of the 217th, meet Chuck Hoy. Junior strategist of mine with the 194th. He's your point, General Shepard. Lieutenant Rand, you're both man of action. Just like me, we'll be the entry team. Specialist Howe, I'm putting you together with some of my computer geeks. When we hit the ground, your job is to infiltrate the enemy control room, pinpoint the location of all the VIPs, and forward that information to Llewellyn and Hoyer. Looking at them both, I'm counting on you to quickly set up a command node so you can relay information to the full battalion and distribute orders as needed. Rescue Operation Vandercook Lake Prison Complex. Location: Vandercook Lake, State of Jackson. Time: midday, clear sky. The sun hung high in the sky, its rays reflecting off the metallic surfaces of helicopters as they cut through the air, their approach nearly silent, their dark matte paint blending with the midday haze. The Vandercook Lake Prison Complex loomed ahead, a sprawling facility, surrounded by high walls and an iron gate that separated the inmates from the world outside. The sentries on guard at the complex were already aware of the incoming helicopters. Though they flew below radar, they could hear the chopping of the blades in the wind. From the north watchtower of the prison complex. "Incoming!" a voice shouted as the alarm blared, sending the guards into an immediate frenzy. Before Voss and his team could react, the first of the helicopters was struck. A fiery trail followed its descent, and a secondary explosion rocked the facility. Another 2 Chinooks were shot down, falling one after the other. The prison-esque outer gate quivered under the impact of tank fire as ground forces moved in. Disguised in black paint, the Jasper and Citrine tanks had breached the outer perimeter, their heavy fire suppressing any counterattack from the facility. The air was thick with tension. The rescue operation had begun. The rescue team. A group of black-clad figures silently infiltrated the outer grounds. Leading the charge, General Hank Voss Sr. stood tall, opening fire on a squad of enemy forces, his tactical movements measured, sharp. Beside him was General Curtis Shepard, a steady hand amidst the chaos, and Lieutenant Doyon Rand, whose sharp eyes and quick reflexes cut through the confusion like a knife. Voss' voice crackled over their encrypted comms, directing the team with military precision. "Rand, Shepard, we were moving in on Heistus first." "We can't afford any mistakes," Voss ordered, his voice unwavering. Doyon gave a curt nod, his black gear blending with the shadows as he advanced with the team. The familiar hum of their boots against the cracked ground seemed almost soothing in the storm of gunfire surrounding them. Inside the prison, A.E. Eustace, the chief medical officer of the state of Kalamazoo, had been held in a separate wing, away from the general population. Voss knew that securing Eustace would set the pace for the rest of the operation. Eustace didn't know General Voss personally, but he was deeply grateful for the rescue. "Thank you, soldier," Eustace said, his voice tight as he shook Voss' hand. "I can say how much this means to me." Voss gave a nod, his steely gaze softening for just a moment. "We not done yet, sir. We need to get you out of here." Eustace nodded, his face grim. "There's more at stake here than you know." Philip Mitchell. His research. It's critical. Voss, as eyes sharpened. "We'll get to him. He's on our priority list." At the command node, meanwhile, Chucky Hoye and Llewellyn, the strategists from the 194th and 217th respectively, were securely situated at the northeast of the complex. They communicated in real time with the battalion, making decisions as quickly as the situation unfolded. "Mitchell-esque location?" Chucky barked over the comms, his voice cutting through the noise of battle. "Not yet," Llewellyn replied. "We were working on it, but there's been a problem. The Union guy, James Hofs, he's been executed." Hoye gritted his teeth. "Damn, no time to mourn. Keep moving." The search for Philip Mitchell, Voss, Shepard, and Rand moved swiftly, cutting through the chaos. Their next objective: extract Philip Mitchell, a potion maker with the 31st Genesee Central Division, held in an isolated wing. As they navigated the labyrinth of hallways, gunfire echoed through the prison, but the elite team pressed on, their resolve unshaken. The A-10 commander of the wing, 3 A-5s, and a squad of A-1s flanked from the rear. General Shepard began making light work of the A-1s. General Voss punched the A-10 through a brick wall. 2 of the A-5s grabbed Lieutenant Rand on both sides, one arm each. Rand spun around, making them dizzy, and then smashed their heads together. General Voss admired as the 3rd A-5 opened fire on Rand from afar. He pulled out his service pistol. Then pow! Bang! Boom! The 3rd A-5 went down. General Voss smiled. "Lieutenant Rand, you just may be the kind of guy I like. When they finally reached Mitchell S. location, the air was thick with the smell of gunpowder. The isolated wing was heavily guarded. Voss assessed the situation before giving a signal. In perfect coordination, the team launched their assault. The guards never stood a chance. The battle was hard, brutal, but successful. Mitchell was secured, and the team began making their way out. Over the radio, General Voss announced to Chucky Hoy, "I've got several of the top priority prisoners. Extracting them now. Remain behind. Complete the mission and rescue as many prisoners as you can. Voss out." A distant truth. In the midst of the chaos, as the helicopter was prepped for their extraction, Philip Mitchell leaned toward Lieutenant Doyon Rand, his voice barely a whisper over the hum of the rotors. "I've been in contact with Ruby Jean," Mitchell said, his words deliberate, almost cautious. "We've been working on an antibody. Progress has been good." Rand's expression didn't change. His focus never wavered, but the briefest of nods acknowledged the confirmation. There was no need for further words. The mission was going well, but not without its cost. Yet for Voss, Rand, Shepard, and the rest of the team, the next phase of the war was well in progress, but were they prepared? 5. At the 40 Winks Complex Hotel Lounge and Bar, Erica Burns sat at a table alone. Unusual to her character, a glass of scotch sat at the table in front of her. Her mascara clung to the corner of her eyes in shrieks, the kind only tears could draw. Whatever she'd been crying about, it hadn't finished with her yet. She knew she had a meeting with members from the Washington Street families as well as Martin Maxwell, but it didn't matter right now. The death of James Hopes, her upcoming battle with the Senate, the whole conflict in Kalamazoo, it all simply overwhelmed her. The first to arrive was Martin Maxwell. He had an attractive young lady with him. He glanced at the glass of scotch, then glanced at her in surprise. "Erica, you okay?" "The world keeps spinning," Erica replied, "and I can't get my balance." "I just want it all to stop for a moment." Martin gestured to the waiter. "Can we get some coffee over here, please? The world doesn't stop for anyone, Erica, but neither should we. I'd like for you to meet my niece, Rita." "Hello," the young lady greeted warmly. Maxwell handed her a handkerchief. "Could you please fix yourself up before the families arrive?" The waiter brought over the coffee. "I hear your citrine soldiers may find use of my product in Vandercook Lake. You ought to be proud." "Yeah, but they couldn't rescue Hofs," Erica sarcastically retorted as she adjusted her makeup. "From what I understand, they rescued 14 other prisoners. That's got to count for something," Maxwell replied. Erica sighed. "What you don't understand, Martin, is that James Hofs was a protege of mine. Before the conflict began, I convinced him to rally the unions against the industrial oligarchs. Even though he voted citrine, he knew just as well as I did, under Azerite domination, citrine would be in just as much of a muck as Jasper. Behind the scenes, it was me that rallied his unions that contributed to the death of Commander Schmuck. And that's when all heck broke loose." "Well, Erica, you've got the world in front of you, spread eagle. You know what to do now?" "What?" Erica asked. "Fuck it," she laughed. Members of the Washington Street families began to file in. He took notice as one of the family members made mention of a fancy new motorcycle that Doyon Rand was recently seen riding as they gathered around the table. "That reminds me, I've got some merchandise for him to look at too," he thought to himself. "Well, it looks like the gang's all here. Let's head up to my office," Erica said as she began to rise. They all followed suit to the elevators. As Erica opened the door to the citrine office, they all noticed a man in a utility uniform standing on top of a table, putting something inside of an open vent. "He's not supposed to be here," Erica said. Maxwell and the families drew their weapons. "You guys aren't supposed to be here either. Just hold him until I can get security." "Well, there goes that deposit," Martin Maxwell said to his niece. "Fortunately, I've got other options on the table this trip." When Rand got the message to meet up with Maxwell, he was elated. His mother had just bought him a fancy new motorcycle, and he loved showing it off. Most of the officers off duty were at Denny's, so he decided to meet there so he could both meet up with Martin Maxwell and show off his fancy new motorcycle. He walked into the restaurant, high-fived a couple of officers, and saw Maxwell seated at the table. He also noticed a stunningly beautiful young lady sitting at the table with him. He shook it off and proceeded. After introductions, they discussed a recent fight Maxwell's nephew had with the Silver Domes in the state of Oakland, along with some of the funny activity that was going on in Arcadia. Martin made mention of a possible Rover Hedonist connection. Then Doyon talked about the 194th and their recent rescue mission in Vandercook Lake. It was during that time that Maxwell started noticing how Doyon and his niece kept glancing at each other, but he also took notice of how some of the officers were glancing at him and Doyon. Martin sat there with an awkward look on his face. When Doyon noticed, he stopped and asked, "Are you okay, Martin?" "All good, Daddy-O," Maxwell replied. "I got something to show you." "Come with me to my truck." Opening the tarp to his pickup truck, Doyon's jaw dropped when he saw the cases of Viper Strike MX-9 rocket-propelled launchers. Maxwell smiled, a little taste. "How many you got?" Doyon asked. "How many you need?" Maxwell replied. "About 200. I ain't got that much offhand, but I could start you off with 50. Doyon sighed as he lit his pipe. "Well, something's better than nothing." As Doyon gave Maxwell the time and location for the drop, Rita covertly stuffed something in Doyon's pocket. This didn't go unnoticed by Maxwell. However, he didn't particularly mind. He knew that Rita was attracted to men of war, and he knew that Doyon was one hell of a soldier. 6. Frederick Dixon invited Coster to Yaktown to pick up a package from the Rover Hedonist Syndicate at the M1. He knew Coster's one weakness, Wolverine brandy, and as long as he kept pouring, Coster would keep talking. A couple of years ago, Coster said, LaRon Raines and Emerlyn Cass formed a non-profit organization for 2 reasons: to lobby for new laws in Alphason and to spy on it from within. They lobbied against rail unions and we made money on the back end. We bought cereal mills and used cheap labor. And get this, they still had to kick up union dues to us. The shit went so good, after a while we extended to Galleria. Raines told Cass, why not run for governor? We knew what was going on in Alphason before Alphason did. And so he did. And he won. Barely. Frederick chuckled as he poured them both another glass. How the hell did he pull that off? He used the non-profit. They do stuff like hire janitors who secretly work for us. And they do stuff like install listening devices in assembly offices. Shit like that. That's how he got the insight. As he finished the sentence, 3 white vans pulled into the concourse. Raines brothers and Silverdome henchmen began unloading the product from the vans and putting them into their respective vehicles. In a conversational tone, Frederick approached one of the syndicate members. That's some clean shit you boys been sending us. Where y'all cut it at? No need to worry about that, said the syndicate member. Just know that your clientele is happy, your bosses are happy, and we are happy. As the vans pulled off, Frederick memorized the plate numbers on the back. He would write them down later. Score 1 for the pussy whisperer, he thought to himself. 7. On a particularly cold January evening, Erica Burns sat in her office on the 19th floor of the 40 Winks complex. The wind audibly howled and the building creaked. As she concluded her phone conversation with Gary Brown, 41st Jade House representative, so he was installing some sort of listening device, Brown asked. Yeah, Erica replied. When the sheriff's department booked him for processing, they found that he had an extensive criminal record and ties to the Raines brothers. To which I'm not surprised, Brown said. The waters are getting muddy and tomorrow's the big day. Hearings on the security stabilization bill. How are you getting to Alphason? Plane, train, automobile? A 1-hour train ride doesn't sound bad to me. Get to sip some tea. Look at the back country, Erica said as she glanced at the TV, a Doppler image of the nation of Magna Maris 5 catching her attention. She reached for the remote and turned up the volume. And this storm front is going to pound the entire lower third of the nation. Sovereign offices have announced the closing of all government buildings. Road crews will do what they can, but this snow will be overwhelming. Back to you, Tom. Click. Erica gasped. Gary, did you hear this? Hear what Gary asked? On Channel 7, it's a storm coming. All government buildings will be closed. It may not be such a bad thing, Erica. It could get you enough time to wrangle up a few more votes. You've got a few of us here at Jade, but Azurite will have a strong presence up there. This may give you time to work on Lepidolite support. I suppose you're right, Gary. Let me get home before the storm starts closing in around here. I'll talk to you later. Bye, Erica. Click. As she was putting on her coat, an aide came into her office with an envelope. This was left for you at the front desk. It passed security, but it just had this written on it. To Erica Burns from Pussy Whisperer. She ushered the aide away. With her coat halfway off, she reached for her cassette player. 217th MM5 Officers Apartments, Kalamazoo. Doyon Rand sat on the couch in his apartment, thumbing through the television channels, remote control in one hand, pipe in the other. They were supposed to go on patrol, but hazardous weather conditions put restrictions on 217th activity for the night. Bored, and without nothing to do, he jumped up excitedly as the phone rang, hoping that it may be a change of heart from command. He picked up the receiver. Doyon here. Hey, Rand. It's Martin Maxwell. The lieutenant's shoulders slumped. Hey, Martin, what's going on? I gotta ask for you. Doyon, what do you need from me? Well, it's not actually you that I need the favor from. It's your boy, James Howe. Can he run a license plate? Doyon grinned. James Howe could run a symphony orchestra in binary code. What do you have? I got a piece of mail. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a package. It was just a note. Check this out. It had 3 license plates and a name, Pussy Whisperer. Ah, sounds interesting, said Doyon. I'm guessing that I'm guessing that this has something to do with the syndicate. Bingo, Maxwell said. Well, you just gave me a replacement adventure tonight. Give me the plates. These are province plates, Maxwell replied. KZ418Q7DLP903X and 7NBM241. I'm going to go to James's room and see what he can fish out. Wow, Maxwell said. Military life is sweet. James has an apartment too? No, you got to be an officer to get an apartment here, at least government funded. No, James' room is the comm room. He practically lives there. I'll talk to you later. Inside the 217th dimly lit communications room, fluorescent lights hummed above rows of beige machines, spinning reels, and clacking teletypes. 2 signal analysts hunched over side-by-side consoles. Corporal Julius Juke Danforth, tall and wiry with Coke bottle glasses, and Specialist James Howe, older, stocky, with a permanent pencil behind his ear. A thin curl of cigarette smoke traced upward from an ashtray balanced between the terminals. Juke squinted at the flickering green readout on his display. You know this whole place is obsolete, right? Punch cards? Paper tape? Hell, we still feeding a beast that's half vacuum tubes. Howe tapped a command into his terminal without looking up. Yeah, well, vacuum tubes don't fry under EMP, like your precious integrated circuits. You keep pushing for silicon, let a solar flare hit us, and we'll be transmitting through smoke signals. That's the problem with you signal guys, Juke muttered. Too busy living in fear of gamma bursts to appreciate the future. Have you seen the Altair 8800? It's a modular micro. You can load BASIC from a cassette. A cassette how? Doyon Rand stepped into the communications room. Corporal, take a coffee break. Yes, sir, he saluted as he exited. Doyon handed James Howe a piece of paper. What's this? License plates, he said. I need you to run them. Why can't you just curl up by the fire with a nice book? Howe complained. Look, Doyon replied, it's a favor from Maxwell. He'll look out for me. I'll look out for you. Yes, sir. Hal replied in mock salute as he turned to his terminal. He jokingly said, "Let me see," said the blind man to his deaf daughter as he glanced at the piece of paper that Doyon handed to him. "Pussy Whisperer, friend of yours?" "I'm not quite sure who or what Pussy Whisperer is. I'm just a dog chasing a car at this point. Accessing database at Port-au-Prince vehicle registries. Looks like we've got a hit here. Cobalt Moon Kodastic Temple, 19013 Gallagher Street, Connaught Jardin. Isn't that Maxwell's neck of the woods?" "Give me a printout of that," Doyon replied without answering the question. "Whatever you and Maxwell are cooking up, I want 60%. I did the grunt work. Or you can just give me your sister's number and we'll be straight." "Whap!" "Hey, what the hell was that?" James said, grabbing the back of his scalp. Smiling, Doyon said, "Sorry, it's a reflex. You talk about my sister, you get a oops upside the head." 8. Inside the National Associated Press offices of Magnum 5, midday. The low hum of clattering typewriters filled the cramped office as reporters hunched over their desks, the occasional rattle of an old-fashioned fax machine punctuating the atmosphere. A few video cameras sat on carts near the window, gathering dust, while old reel-to-reel tape recorders buzzed quietly in the corner. The windows, streaked with snow, framed a city blanketed in a white fog. In the distance, the howling winds of the storm could be heard, a blizzard tearing across the plains of Magnum 5, coating the streets in an icy veil. The city, like the newsroom, was cold and static, with tension simmering just beneath the surface. A young, ambitious reporter, Carl Woodward, sat at a corner desk near the window, jotting notes. His fingers flew over the keys of the typewriter, but his eyes kept darting back to the mail cart, rolling through the office, hoping for anything newsworthy. Bob Bernstein, the charismatic editor-in-chief, reclined in his cluttered chair with a cigarette dangling from his lips. His glasses were perched precariously on the tip of his nose as he flipped through a stack of papers, looking for something sensational, something juicy that would keep the Associated Press in the headlines. The mail cart squeaked to a stop beside Bernstein's desk. An intern, oblivious to the storm outside, dropped a package in front of Bernstein, bearing only the cryptic name, Pussy Whisperer. Bernstein scoffed. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" He pushed the package aside with a flick of his fingers. "Probably a prank," Woodward muttered, barely looking up from his notes. "Who even writes letters by hand anymore?" But Bernstein had other ideas. He slapped the package away and reached for the snowstorm story on his desk instead. "Forget the cat's pajamas nonsense. We've got a gold mine here. Corruption at the Road Commission, big union stuff, bribery. Union bosses cutting deals with snowplow companies. I'm going to sensationalize this. This'll keep us in the press for weeks." Carl's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. He'd seen Bernstein's methods before. He wasn't interested in real stories, only those that would fill the page and grab headlines. Just then, Carl's curiosity got the better of him. He picked up the package, he opened it. There was a small cassette tape inside. He shrugged and pressed the small cassette tape into an old tape recorder beside him. The static hum filled the room, and then a voice crackled to life. The room fell silent. The voice on the tape was smooth, confident, almost too casual. LaRon Rains and Emerlyn Cass formed a nonprofit organization for 2 reasons: to lobby for new laws in Alphason and to spy on it from within. They lobbied against rail unions, and we made money on the back end. We bought cereal mills and used cheap labor. And get this, they still had to kick up union dues to us. The shit went so good, after a while, we extended the Galleria. Rains told Cass, "Why not run for governor?" We knew what was going on in Alphason before Alphason did, and so he did, and he won. Barely. Bob Bernstein's eyes widened, and for a moment, he just stared at Carl. The clattering of the typewriters in the background seemed to fade away. "Wow, this could be big," Carl said, leaning forward, eager for approval. If this checks out, this could change everything. Governor Cast involved in this kind of corruption? The public has a right to know. An intern, overhearing the conversation, pushed a cart past them and added, or it could be nothing, just some random conspiracy stuff. It did come from a guy calling himself the Pussy Whisperer. Sounds like some freaky shit to me. Bob Bernstein shot the intern a sharp look and cuffed him lightly with a rolled up stack of papers. Shut up and do the mail, he muttered, his gaze returning to Carl. His voice lowered, serious now. If Governor Cast is involved in something this deep, we've got a story, Bernstein said, his tone now more focused. A real one. The road commission can wait. Carl blinked. So, you're no longer interested in the road commission story? Bernstein grinned, the gears turning in his head. To hell with the road commission. This is bigger. This is corruption at the highest levels. This goes straight to the top. This could bring Kalamazoo to its knees if it's true. Woodward's eyes gleamed. You rewrite. If this gets out, Cast and Rain's hell, even the unions, they'll be exposed. We'll have them by the balls. This will drive subscriptions up in Kalamazoo, statewide, from Alamo to Fulton. Hold the presses, Bernstein shouted, slamming his palm on the desk. The room fell silent, the hum of the tape recorder the only sound now. Call the press room. We've got a headline. Get the truth out. This could be our story of the century. The sound of an old manual typewriter echoed in the background as Bernstein's fingers flew over the keys. Carl felt a surge of adrenaline. The storm outside couldn't compare to the storm that was about to hit the governor's office. Outside, the snowstorm continued to rage, but inside the office, a new storm was beginning to stir, one that could unravel the very fabric of the government. 9. A call to home. Doyon Rand, the man with the plan. I got something juicy for you. I followed up on that lead that your boy Hal provided when he ran those license plates I got from the Pussy Whisper. The vehicles belong to the Woven Frayz Syndicate. It looks like they've been cooking up that drug of theirs right in my backyard. They set up in an old abandoned grocery store on Binder Street. Now, I know you military boys aren't interested in the drugs, but they do have a nice little cache of weapons. Black Rift EMP devices, compact stingers, Javelin G5, sniper rifles, the works. What I'm interested in is taking care of some neighborhood rivals. I figure we can do both of ourselves a favor with a military tactical strike starring the good old boys of the 217th. I get unwanted drugs out of my city. You guys get dangerous weapons into some more responsible hands. Rand said, well, there's two problems with that. The 217th is a national central force. That means we don't handle situations in the southeast portion of the nation. The second issue, the governor's weapons restrictions. It wouldn't be necessarily legal for us to have those kind of weapons here at the base. But I do know a guy, an older fella, named Voss, general of the 194th, there stationed at St. Gregory back in the Provence. Out of confusion, Maxwell asked, so if the 194th operate out of the province and the 217th work the central part of the nation, what is the 194th doing out there with you guys? It's political, Rand answered. The regional conflict became a national conflict because too many elected officials were involved. Military forces, own 100 seconds, that's how it got so big. Now, if the Woven Frayz Syndicate were more like elected officials or a more viable threat to the nation as a whole, 217 just might get drafted into that conflict if it became big enough. But because they're not, it's looked at in Alphason more as a regional problem. So the 313th, or in our case, the 194th, would have proper jurisdiction. I was hoping you would be able to come home and help us out, Maxwell said. It might be nice, Rand replied, but legally, I can't get involved in that. I'd have to leave the army and start my own mercenary service. And you, my friend, couldn't afford me as a mercenary. But don't worry, I'll be accompanying Shepard later on at a strategy briefing at the 204th Kalamazoo Central District headquarters. I believe Voss will be there. I'll drop a bug in his ear and see what he has to say. Later on that day, at the 204th Kalamazoo Central District headquarters, General Voss briefing Shepard and his superior on regional statistics. Enemy forces commanded by General Lockett has taken up position in the city of West Leroy. Farmland area, a lot of corn, a lot of wheat. Given our current circumstances, we won't be able to penetrate to get to him, Shepard's superior replied. We've been able to destabilize the stronghold that the 989th established in the upper regions. Even though we can't chop it down, we are shaking the tree a bit. We're pretty much fighting a guerrilla war here, said Drake Call, general of the 31st Genesee Central Division. If we can't bypass these legal restrictions, it's going to take some time for us to put this shit to bed. We're going to have to work with what we got for now, Shepard's superior replied. Impatiently tapping his fingers on the map, the commander of the 204th uttered, "Well, Kodos, help us. We're going to need it. We've got chicken quesadillas in the mess if any of you boys are hungry." Unless anybody else has got anything to add. General Voss replied, "Not at this time, Commander. Let's go eat." Finding his moment outside of the briefing room, Lieutenant Rand approached General Voss. "Sir, can I talk to you for a moment?" "What is it, Rand?" "I'm hungry. I came across some information today from a friend of mine back in the province. The Rover Hedonist Syndicate has a shop set up in Conat Jardins. He wanted me to help him out, but it's outside of the jurisdiction of the 217th. I thought maybe, since you guys got people down in St. Gregory, you could have a look. These are the guys that have been distributing those hard drugs across the country. This raid could get a lot of dangerous weapons into some more responsible hands, and a lot of hard drugs off the streets." General Voss grinned. "I know what you're doing here, son." Rand was stunned. "Sir," Voss continued, "you're pulling on my heartstrings like a banjo. You know that I would love to get some weapons in the hands of my boys down at St. Gregory's. You probably also figured that I'm homesick just as much as you are. I'll tell you what, because this thing is tied to the syndicate, I might be able to work up some sort of jurisdiction. So we'll go back to the province, and I'll see if I can convince that stiff-necked commander of yours to allow me to take you with me. If this works in my favor, I'll grant us all a weekend furlough down there." Rand smiled. "Now, son, chicken quesadillas. Let's go." WKZO AM Breaking News. You retuned in to WKZO, the voice of Kalamazoo. This just in. A stunning leak from the Magni Maris 5 Associated Press. A cassette tape mailed anonymously and attributed only to a figure calling himself Pussy Whisperer has made its way into press circulation, and its contents may implicate top-level government corruption tied to Governor Emerlin Cast and his allies. The following audio has not been officially authenticated, but what you're about to hear may shake the state capitol to its core. Tape starts. Emerlin Cast formed a non-profit organization for two reasons: to lobby for new laws in Alphason and to spy on it from within. They lobbied against rail unions, and we made money on the back end. We bought cereal mills and used cheap labor. And get this, they still had to kick up union dues to us. Tape ends. Brief pause. That voice is not confirmed to be any official figure, but the allegations alone, if true, could unravel everything from rail contracts to education oversight. For those just tuning in, Dr. Emerlin Cass, governor of Kalamazoo, has long faced quiet allegations stemming from his days as chair of the Kalamazoo State Indoctrination Board, including rumored mismanagement of teachers' union funds. Now, with this tape entering public discourse, eyes turn once again toward Alphason, and whispers of a national investigation grow louder by the hour. Stay with WKZO for the latest. And now back to your regularly scheduled program. Chapter: Loose Lips and Leaked Tapes. The wind whipped across the Desenberg building parking lot in downtown Kalamazoo, pulling winter's breath down the alleyways like a silent omen. Erica Burns leaned against her car, hands buried in the pockets of her coat, as the last sliver of afternoon light bled across the icy pavement. Gary Brown of the 41st Jade House stood opposite her, a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and a smirk on his lips. "They played a part of the damn thing on WKZO this morning," Gary said. "Didn't even censor the name. Pussy Whisperer. You believe that?" Erica chuckled, brushing a lock of hair from her face. Magni Maris 5 never had much of a filter, but this is different. The people are starting to listen. They better... If even half of what that tape says is true, we were standing on a house of lies with a broken foundation. "I'm stopping at the store on my way home," she said, walking to her door. "Need some tea to calm the nerves. Make it the strong stuff. You gon' need it." Erica waved as she slid into the driver's seat and shut the door. A moment later, the car pulled off into the gray murk of the city. Moments later, Grocer Lot, Vine Street. The bell above the door jingled as Erica stepped into the dim glow of the local grocer. She grabbed a box of lavender honey tea from the shelf, exchanged pleasantries with the sleepy-eyed cashier, and stepped back out into the world, steam rising from the gutters. She unlocked the door, settled in, started the engine, and drove off. "Nice choice. I like to put brandy in my tea." Erica flinched eyes darting to the rearview mirror. A bald-headed man with a blue jersey was seated calmly in the back seat, his posture relaxed like he'd been waiting there all day. "Who are you?" The man smiled faintly. "I am the Pussy Whisperer, Erica." She didn't speak, just stared until the recognition sank in. I know you. You re-with the Silver Domes of Yaktown." "Was with them," he corrected. "Let's just say I'm turning over a new leaf. So what do you want?" "The governor has got secrets," he said flatly. "He records everything, every meeting, every lie. Is the Auditor General involved?" "I believe the Auditor General is dead," Dixon whispered, "and I think the governor killed him himself." Erica's jaw clenched. "Why tell me?" "I've been hearing things from Costa," Dixon muttered, looking out the window. "Paranoia, bloodlust. The governor's hiding more than tapes. Where does he keep them? I don't know. But General Lockett's stronghold in West Leroy, that's where I look. The governor trusts him, and Lockett S. built up a whole platoon of drug-numb kids from Kalamazoo, ready to die for Azurite causes." "What about the syndicate?" "They renew," Dixon said. "But they resupplying the Rains brothers with a new formula, stronger, faster. It keeps them high, keeps them dumb. That's the governor's goal. Fodder." Erica turned onto Portage Street, her mind racing. That's when the first SUV cut her off. Two more boxed her in. Tires screeched. Doors flung open. Masked figures stepped out with rifles and blades, silent, surgical. "Ambush!" Dixon hissed, reaching for something inside his coat, but it was too late. The air exploded in glass and fire. A storm of bullets tore through the car in a flash of heat and light. Erica's scream was silenced by the echoing rattle of gunfire. By the time the smoke cleared, both Frederick Dixon and Erica Burns were gone, riddled with lead, slumped in their seats like broken marionettes. Later that night, Syndicate Warehouse, upper office. Costa wiped blood from his gloves and stepped into the office. The warehouse below buzzed with storage crates, soldiers, and shadows, but the upstairs was silent, cold. LaRon Rains sat behind his desk, one boot propped on the table, studying an old map of the southern provinces. "Well?" he asked, not looking up. "They were both dead, Burns and Dixon." "You won't hear from them again." Rains smiled. "Good work, old friend." Costa exhaled and relaxed, stepping toward the desk. Grabbing for the bottle of brandy, Rains rose. "You know how you stop a sinking ship, Costa?" Costa tilted his head. "How?" Rains drew his blade from the desk sheath, the steel gleaming in the low light. "You tighten the lips." The sword flashed. Costa didn't even have time to scream. 10. Winter had draped the city of Konat Jardin in a quiet white hush, but there was nothing peaceful about what was about to unfold. The abandoned grocery store on Binder Street stood like a forgotten relic, windows dark, its parking lot overgrown and crusted with snow. But inside, heat simmered, stoked by the fumes of chemical concoctions and the barrel oil breath of the Rovere Hedonist Syndicate. General Hank Voss Sr. adjusted the collar of his coat as he stepped out of the comms truck into the crisp midday air. His voice rumbled as he spoke to Lieutenant Doyon Rand, who stood beside him, lacing up his combat boots. "Ever wonder how I got the brass to approve this op and bring you along?" Voss asked, eyes scanning the perimeter. "Every step of the way," Rand replied. "The 217th usually doesn't loan out their men." Voss grinned. "It's the burden of command. You learn how to grease the wheels, speak the right lingo, and lean on old favors." Inside the truck, strategist Chucky Hoy pored over surveillance maps. Martin Maxwell, ever the calculating tactician, leaned in with his own contribution. "My nephew Prince got inside yesterday, mapped the whole structure," Martin explained. "Drugs are cooked in the old meat department. They store them in the freezers. Weapons are in the center aisle, makes for quick access." Chucky nodded. "We'll break into 4 squads. 2 flanking, 2 storming. Surveillance is already in place." A flicker on the monitor pulled Hoyer's attention. "Incoming vehicle," he muttered, "looks new. Not local." Martin's eyes narrowed. "That's Roderick Murnith, head cat of the whole damn syndicate. He never shows up in person. Something big's happening." Voss' voice was gravel. "Let's make it bigger." Orders flew fast. Boots hit the snow. The 194th MM5 deployed like wolves, silent, precise. They surrounded the grocery fortress just as Murnith stepped through its threshold. Gunfire erupted. The storm came fast sheets of lead, smoke spiraling into the winter sky. Voss led his team like a myth mighty, implacable, swinging his pulse-burst rifle like a baton of judgment. Rand, flanking through a broken loading dock, moved like fire through corridors of abandoned shelves. They met in the middle back to back, covering each other as syndicate enforcers poured in. "Not bad, Lieutenant," Voss shouted over the chaos. "You either, old man." Then, through the smoke, Murnith, he fired once, then turned, vanishing through a hidden exit in the back. Outnumbered and knowing discretion was survival, the kingpin disappeared into the underworld. Within the hour, the store was secure. Dozens of crates of narcotics and heavy weaponry were stacked like trophies in the parking lot. News crews swarmed. General Voss stood tall. "We've cleared this zone of a major threat to our nation's youth," he stated, his voice amplified across the province. "Drugs seized, weapons recovered. Let this be a message." When the cameras left, Voss clapped Rand on the shoulder. "You earned a break. 2-day furlough. Go home. See your family. Report to me at St. Gregory's afterwards, and we'll head back to Kalamazoo." Before the lieutenant left for Finkel Acres, Martin Maxwell invited him for lunch at the Hillsdale Grill. Inside of the grill, Doyon ordered himself a cup of coffee. "Lieutenant Rand, I'd like for you to meet my nephews, Prince and Digits. You've already met my niece Rita." Rita smiled. "This is my daughter, Angles." Doyon gave a curt nod. "They got some good burgers here, but the best chicken in the area is at the Bisher, just outside of the Hamtramck area in Davison." Lunch was laughter and warmth, old soldiers, young minds, seasoned wisdom. As they stood to leave, Rita stepped beside Doyon. "I'll walk you out." Behind them, Martin leaned into his nephews. That one, he gestured toward Rand. "He's going to shift something big around here. I can feel it. And I think your cousin likes him." Grins broke out. The day faded to dusk. Snow crunched beneath boots as Doyon stepped up to the wide veranda of the Rand family manor in Finkel Acres. A plume of breath escaped his lips as he arrived at the estate. "Bruh," Ruby Jean cried, with their mother smiling behind her. "Hey, Kip. Hey, Mom," he grinned. "Amberson and Job are out back. she said, motioning. The garden was quiet. Amberson sipped spiked hot chocolate while Job leafed through a magazine. Her eyes lit up when she saw him. Doyon. He caught her in a hug. Job stayed seated. No hug? Doyon teased. He's just being Job, Amberson said, patting the bench. Have a seat. We got some catching up to do. Rand sat at the table, placing his duffel bag beside him. Ruby said, well, I'll leave you 3B for a while. Mum smirked at Amberson as her and Ruby walked away. Their cousin Tony drove by on a snowmobile. Hey, Doyon, welcome back. Hey, Tony, I'll talk to you in a minute. Cool. Before Tony pulled off, Job took opportunity to leave. Hey, Tony, wait up, and got on the snowmobile with Tony as he drove off. Job and Tony had been working on some clothing designs recently, Amberson explained. Doyon replied, clothing designs? Are they some sort of fruit cakes? You're too manly for your own good, Doyon. When are you going to leave the military and join up with Douglas and Mum at the shop? I'm not having this conversation with you, Bungie, Doyon replied. I like the military. I get to see the world. But don't you like your family as well? Amberson replied. Before he could say a word, Ruby called out to Doyon from a third-story window. Hey, bruh, come here quick. Got someone who wants to talk to you. Inside the manor den, Ruby handed him the phone. Hey, Lieutenant, it's Phil Mitchell here. Mitchell, I didn't know you were so close with my sister. Mitchell replies, yeah, we've been working close with Dr. Beverly. Been making great progress in the antibody for the drug. I want to thank you for saving my ass back in Vandercook. It's part of the job. You were one of the top priority VIPs. Had to do it. Thanks anyway. If you ever need anything, Doyon, look me up. It was great talking to you. I gotta go. I'll talk to you later, Philip Mitchell said. Goodbye, replied Doyon. Hanging up the phone and turning to Ruby, Doyon asked what's up with Job. He's recovering, bruh. Withdrawals have been rough. Doyon exhaled. We just put a dent in the syndicate. Saw it on the news, you working with the 194th now, huh? You coming back home? Not quite. Don want to argue with Bungie again. Ruby laughed. Great soldier, lousy husband. They shared a laugh, but Doyon felt it the itch, the tug. He grabbed a family car and slid down the Chalfonte freeway. By evening, he pulled into the Ascot bar. A couple drinks later, he found himself at the payphone. Pulled the number from his pocket. Hey, Rita, it's Doyon. What's going on, Doyon? Want to go see a movie? Doyon asked. Sure. Can I bring my daughter Angles? Rita replied. Sure, Doyon replied. The more the merrier. I'm on the way to pick you up. See you later. And into the cold night, he drove with a future slowly unfolding in the rearview mirror. 11. Location, city of Walden Woods at City Hall. Mayor Nia Wing and a few of her aides sat at a conference table in her office, leisurely watching a news broadcast. You're watching WKOZ, M. Keith Shanley. Today, the offices of Dr. Emerlyn Cass, the once chair of Kalamazoo State Indoctrination Board and now governor of Kalamazoo, were raided by national investigators. Sparked by not only the plea deal testimony of one of the individuals caught burglarizing the Magni Maris 5 41st Citrine House District office at the 40 Winks complex, but the recent surfacing of audio released to the Associated Press, where an unknown figure alleges that the governor may be involved in shady union kickback deals. WKOZ's Huel Macupson spoke with a legal expert about what this may mean for the governor and his administration. Huel? The news camera pans left to Huel in front of a separate screen. In the studio, Huel Macupson begins his report. Thank you, Keith. I spoke with former city attorney John Robinson for some legal perspective on this. And though today's raid on the governor's office raises concerns, he doesn't believe that the governor is in any immediate legal trouble. The screen switches to an image of attorney John Robinson. These accusations are mired in baseless, tasteless attempts to besmirch the good name of my good friend Dr. Cass, who has for years contributed to the well-being and the structural foundation of this state. If I were him, I would just have my lawyers talk for me and shut the hell up. The screen then cuts to clips from a news conference the governor held earlier that day. I say to everyone listening today, these facts. I have no knowledge about the 40 Winks break-in. I took no part in or knew about any of the subsequent cover-up details. I never authorized or encouraged subordinates to participate in any unauthorized surveillance tactics. I am not a crook. I would never use my powers, neither now as governor or then as chair of the State Indoctrination Board, for anything other than to secure the well-being of the people of Kalamazoo. The screen switches back to Macobson as he continues his report. I also hit the streets today to get the reaction from Kalamazoo residents to the news of the raids on the governor's office. On screen now, a middle-aged, balding man in a business suit and glasses. I think he's getting his just desserts. He's inexplicably tied up with the Rains brothers, who have no more social consciousness than a cat. The governor has never been a man of principle in my view. The screen then cuts to a man in front of a bus stop. Well, everybody's in trouble that voted for Cass now. I'll be honest and frank with you, and I hope the day comes they realize, and I'm sure that they do now, that I hope that they get somebody better in office to run this state. The camera then pans to an older lady in a blue shawl. Well, I'm sticking by Cass, and I think that he'll be proven innocent. I truly believe that. The camera pans back to Huell in the studio. As this 40 Winks scandal unravels, we at WKZO will give you up-to-the-minute details, however the story develops. Back to you, Keith. In other news, memorial arrangements for the recently slain Erica Burns are still in the process of click. The screen went dark as Mayor Nia Wing turned off the remote. She stared at it for a long moment, her thoughts far from the news broadcast. The aides around the table shifted uneasily, sensing her tension. I don't want to watch any more of this, the mayor said quietly, her voice heavy with something far deeper than frustration. One aide, the youngest of the group, hesitated before speaking. It's an interesting turn of events, this 40 Winks scandal. I'm not talking about the 40 Winks scandal, Nia said, cutting him off sharply. I'm talking about the death of Erica Burns. The room grew silent, the weight of the statement settling heavily. The aides exchanged glances, unsure of how to proceed. The mayor continued, her voice soft but firm. I believe the ghosts of my past are beginning to come back and haunt me. How so? Asked another aide, leaning forward slightly, his curiosity piqued. Nia paused, eyes drifting to the window, where the city outside seemed as unsettled as she felt. She took a deep breath before answering. Well, before the governor was elected, I noticed discrepancies in school funding. There were union contracts for renovations, large projects that had been signed, but none of the work was ever completed. And yet, the funds still went through. The money was allocated, and yet, nothing was done. She paused again, her lips pressing together as the memory resurfaced. I brought it up to the state auditor, Byron Watson. I thought, surely, he would help me get to the bottom of it. But he didn't. He dismissed me. Told me it was just red tape, a clerical issue, nothing to worry about. She looked at her aides, her expression hardening. But it didn't stop there. After the governor was elected, I had a meeting with James Hofs, the union president of IBEW, Local 131. It was during one of those regular union meetings he set up. And that's when I found out the truth. His crews, his men never did the work they were contracted to do. The jobs were left untouched. But the funds, they still went through. Her hands clenched into fists as the realization settled heavily in her chest. It was all part of the plan, a cover-up that goes far deeper than I ever imagined. I can only guess what else they've been doing with those union funds. There was a brief silence before one of the aides spoke up, his voice unsure. But with Erica dead, and all this coming to light, do you think the governor is involved in all of it? The mayor turned away, staring at the cold landscape outside her window. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. I don't know, but I'm starting to believe he has something to do with it all. I'm scared, and I've never been scared before. Her voice grew more resolute. I'm thankful to the 217th and the 194th for rescuing me from the prison complex, but I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over yet. Not by a long shot. She exhaled sharply, turning back to face her aides. I know the governor may have a back door to use to wiggle out of this mess, and that terrifies me. The room was silent for a moment as the weight of the mayor's words hung in the air. Finally, Nia spoke again, her tone becoming steady and deliberate. Erica and I were proud members of the Citrine Party. We believed in its potential, in its ideals. But after what happened to her, after what's happened to me, and what I'm afraid is coming, I can't continue on this path any longer. I can't afford to be a part of that world anymore. Not with my life, nor my family's at stake. She stood, her eyes focused on the city skyline once more. I value my life too much now to go any further. The governor S political games. I'm done with them. The aides remained quiet, their expressions reflecting the gravity of what the mayor had said. They understood that the battle had changed, and the stakes were now more personal than ever. Nia Wing had chosen her path, but now she had to walk it with caution, knowing the ghosts of the past were closing in. 12. Erica's final stand, City of Alphason. The great chamber of the MM 541st House fell silent as Chairperson Valdez of the 24th Lepidolite House called the emergency session to order. The ornate walls, carved with symbols of the 5 political factions, seemed to press in on the assembled representatives as they took their seats in the color-coded sections that had defined their allegiances for generations. In the Citrine section, a single empty chair served as a stark reminder of recent tragedy. Erica Burns would never again grace these halls with her sharp wit and unwavering dedication to justice. We gather today, Chairperson Valdez began, her voice carrying the weight of ceremony, to consider the Security Stabilization Bill, posthumously sponsored by the late Erica Burns of the Citrine Party. Mabel Stell rose from her seat, clutching a folder of documents against her chest like a shield. The young Citrine representative had never spoken before the full assembly, but today she carried the hopes of a fallen colleague. Honorable colleagues, Stell began, her voice trembling slightly. I present this bill not as my own work, but as the final legislative gift from Representative Burns. She died believing that our democracy was under siege from within. A murmur rippled through the chamber. In the Azurite section, Joe Mowat shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his fingers drumming against the armrest with barely contained impatience. The Security Stabilization Bill, Stell continued, finding her strength, would establish clear boundaries on elected officials' ability to interfere with weapons distribution, military logistics, and information flow during times of crisis. It would prevent the kind of corruption that has plagued our state during this conflict. From the Jade section, Gary Brown stood with practiced authority. The veteran representative commanded respect even from his political opponents, his graying hair and weathered face speaking to years of service. Chairperson Valdez, Brown said, his voice carrying across the chamber, the Jade Party supports this critical legislation. We have watched as emergency powers have been twisted into tools of oppression. Representative Burns identified a cancer in our system, and this bill offers the cure. Joel Mowat shot to his feet before Brown had finished speaking. Objection! The representative from Jade speaks of cures while proposing to tie our hands in the face of crisis. The representative from Azurite will wait to be recognized. Chairperson Valdez said firmly. Mowat's face flushed red, but he remained standing. Chairperson, this so-called stabilization bill would leave our citizens defenseless. In times of war, elected officials must have the authority to protect their constituents by any means necessary. The chamber erupted in crosstalk as representatives from different factions began arguing among themselves. Chairperson Valdez called for order, her gavel striking the podium with sharp, decisive blows. "The representative from Azurite will state his case," she announced. Mowat stepped forward, his voice rising with passion. "This bill is not about preventing corruption, it's about preventing action. When enemy forces threaten our communities, when dangerous information could fall into the wrong hands, we need the flexibility to act. The stabilization bill would create a bureaucratic maze that would cost lives. The representative mistakes corruption for decisive action," Brown countered, his voice steady and controlled. "We have seen how emergency powers have been used to silence opposition, to redirect resources away from legitimate defense toward personal gain. The Burns bill would ensure that military resources serve their intended purpose, protecting our citizens, not enriching those in power." The debate continued for hours, each side presenting evidence, precedents, and passionate arguments. Representatives from the smaller factions, Lepidolite, Citrine, and others asked pointed questions that cut to the heart of the matter. What safeguards, asked the Lepidolite representative, would prevent legitimate emergency responses? "The bill includes provisions for genuine emergencies," Stell replied, consulting her notes. "It requires transparency and accountability, not the elimination of emergency powers." "And what of classified information?" pressed another member. "Surely some operational details must remain secret." "The bill distinguishes between operational security and information suppression," Brown explained. "Military tactics can remain classified while still allowing oversight of resource allocation and strategic decisions." As the afternoon wore on, the arguments grew more intense. Mowat accused his opponents of naivety, while Brown methodically dismantled each objection with legal precedent and logical reasoning. Finally, as the sun began to set outside the chamber's tall windows, Chairperson Valdez called for a vote. All in favor of the Security Stabilization Bill? Hands rose throughout the chamber. The Jade section voted as a block, their green identification cards held high. The Jasper representatives, fewer in number but united in purpose, raised their hands in solidarity. From the Citrine section, the remaining representatives honored their fallen colleague with unanimous support. All opposed? The Azurite section responded with their own show of hands, but their numbers were insufficient. A few scattered representatives from other factions joined them, but the tide had turned. "The bill passes," Chairperson Valdez announced, by a margin of 63 to 37. The chamber erupted in applause from the majority, while the Azurite section sat in stony silence. But Mabel Stell wasn't finished. "Chairperson," she called out, her voice now strong and clear, "I move to amend the bill's title." The chamber fell quiet again. "In honor of the representative who gave her life to expose the corruption this bill addresses, I propose that the Security Stabilization Bill be renamed the Erica Burns Memorial Bill." The motion passed without opposition, even members of the Azurite faction abstaining rather than voting against honoring the dead. As the session concluded and representatives filed out of the chamber, Gary Brown approached Mabel Stell. "She would have been proud," he said quietly. "Erica fought for this moment, and you carried her vision across the finish line." Stell looked back at the empty chair in the Citrine section, then at the official record being updated by the chamber clerk. The Erica Burns Memorial Bill would take effect immediately, its provisions binding on all elected officials throughout the nation. "She said once that democracy dies in darkness," Stell replied. "Today, we turned on the lights." Outside the chamber, the war continued to rage, but within these walls, a different kind of victory had been won. The system had bent but not broken, and the memory of Erica Burns would live on in the law that bore her name, a law that would help ensure that future crises could not be so easily exploited by those who would put personal power above public service. The Erica Burns Memorial Bill was now the law of the land, and in a conflict defined by corruption and betrayal that represented something precious, hope that justice could still prevail. 13194th MM, 5 Port Doe West Division, Headquarters St. Gregoris. Doyon Rand reported to the 194th Headquarters at St. Gregory's in Finkel Acres at the end of his furlough. He had never been to St. Gregory's before, only passing it while driving down the Chalfonte Highway. He was astonished by the size of the complex. It was a city within a city, complete with training centers, gymnasiums, public shelters, schools, training yards, military base, and a Caducean temple. Commissioned by the Dialogy of Codoston 1923 CE, with its first chapel services held in the St. Francis Home for Boys. It had since grown into one of many megastructure complexes throughout the nation. The Dialogy of Codoston commissioned many different complexes for many of its parishioners' different alignments in Codost. St. Gregory's was aligned in Jasper, and so it housed the Jasper Army. The 194th, founded by the Port de Provence commissioners in 1923 CE. The entry checkpoint guard at the gate of the base was confused when Doyon showed up with a 217th patch on his shoulder. A Jeep pulled up to the gate, driven by a private and a private riding shotgun. In the back was a mid-ranking female officer with auburn hair. "Stand down, sentry, I'll take him from here." Doyon wasn't sure whether she was a kicker or a kisser. "I'm presuming that you're Lieutenant Rand." "It's your service, ma'am," he replied. "I'm Captain Ashley Jewell. General Voss has instructed me to escort you to his office. Dive on in, cutie pie. The water's just fine," she said as she patted the back seat next to her. He climbed in the back seat and away they drove. As they drove through the complex, on the way to the command building, General Captain Jewell turned to the lieutenant and said, "So you're the one responsible for getting the general home? If not for a little while, huh?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied, "not out of rank, but out of respect." "Well, thank God for you, sir. The boys around here have been getting a little lackluster in the absence of the general. It seems to me that they missed the tingling sensation of Voss's boot up their ass." When they entered the threshold of the general's office, he was enthralled in a book, The Caretaker by Harold Pinter. "Excuse me, General." He held up one finger. He continued for a second and said, "That'll be all, Captain Jewell." "Thank you, sir," she replied as she closed the office door. Tossing a book on top of a pile of paperwork and scratching his chest, he looked up to the lieutenant. "How'd you enjoy your furlough?" "Very good, sir." "I don't imagine you watch much news." "No, sir, I don't. Neither do I. Too damn melancholy. One of my boys here at the base, however, Anthony Lyles, I don't think that son of a bitch ever misses a broadcast. He's informed me about a chain of events that recently unfolded back in Kalamazoo. You remember Costa, the Raines brothers' enforcer?" "Yes, sir, I do." "Yeah, well, he's dead. Apparently, along with Frederick Dixon, who turns out to be the Pussy Whisperer, and Erica Burns. On top of that, a whole scandal has erupted at the governor's office. They're calling it 40 winks. But here's the good news in all this. Apparently, Erica Burns was working on some legislation to bypass the governor's restriction on us in armaments. It's now called the Erica Burns Memorial Bill, and it passed. We get to bring some of those weapons we confiscated from the Rovere Hedonist Syndicate to Kalamazoo with us. I've got them stored in the armory. Let's mount up and head back to Kalamazoo. Before Lieutenant Rand returned from his furlough, his mother had given him a movie poster, Richard Pryor, Which Way Is Up. He was in the process of hanging it on his wall when he got a knock at his apartment door. He opened the door, and there stood Martin Maxwell and his niece Rita. He noticed behind them a few privates were watching them, whispering amongst each other. He couldn't understand why. He had put the both of them on his visitors list. They passed through security. "Come on in," he said, closing the door after they entered. Taking off his hat, Maxwell said, "Looks like the region went and got itself in a hurry up here while we were back home, huh?" The lieutenant shook his head in agreement, lighting his pipe. "Yeah, the governor's under investigation. Coster, Burns, Dixon, wow, and the Erica Burns Memorial Bill Maxwell added. I wasn't going to bring that up, but it doesn't look like we'll be needing your services around here much longer. Maxwell sighed. Yeah, I can dig it. It's finishing up some shit with the Washington Street families and tying up a few other loose ends. He raised his eyebrow as Rita casually walked to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator door. What are you going to do now? Lieutenant Rand asked. I've built up somewhat of a rapport with the families up here. Even though my involvement will be limited, I do look forward to seeing this thing end. Me too, the lieutenant replied, as Rita sat next to him with a freshly poured glass of Kool-Aid in her hand. For a while, Maxwell and Rand reminisced on all that they had been through in Kalamazoo. Then, noticing the time, Maxwell rose up from his seat and said, I've got a couple of hours to make it back to the province. He noticed that Rita didn't stand. I'll make it home okay, she said. Maxwell grabbed a handle to the door and looked at the lieutenant as if to say, you sly dog, and exited the apartment. The next morning, as Rita was leaving the lieutenant's apartment, he was sort of hoping that no one would be outside, but as luck would have it, someone was outside, and of all people, it was Shepard's superior officer. He sort of glanced at him and then looked away as Rita exited and made her way off the base. Shortly after, Rand made it to the mess hall for breakfast. After collecting his tray, he found the table and took a seat. Shortly after, Specialist James Howe sat across from him, eating his breakfast while looking down. Not looking at Rand, he said, Did you hear about the scandal? Yeah, Rand replied. The 40 Wink scandal. Unbelievable, huh? No, Lieutenant. The Doyon Wink scandal. What? Rand replied. That son of a bitch saw her leave, but I never thought he'd be one to gossip. How did that spread that fast? What are you talking about? Replied James Howe. Curious. What are you talking about? Replied Rand. Your connection with Maxwell has talked all over the base about you being tied in with the mob, running guns, running drugs with the Maxwells. They say that's how you got that new bike. Man, my mother got me that bike. My family's got shops, real estate. I don't need dirty money. Why do you think I'm able to take care of everybody's tab at the bar on weekend leave? That's the room around the base, Lieutenant. They're calling it Doyon Winks. Sensationalized by the ongoing 40 Wink scandal. You're a star around here. Well, ain't that some shit? 1978, 5th Wyclin. The commander of the Kalamazoo Central Division, Jasper, aligned 204th, stood proud with a gleam in his eye as he looked at the colorful convoy of troops piling up on 3 Mile Road in West Leroy's state of Calhoun. His adversary, Cedrice Lockett, commander of the 325th Kalamazoo Central Azurite Aligned Division, had long set up this territory as a stronghold that he and his allies couldn't reach, due to legislative restrictions, but not anymore. Beside him stood General Curtis Shepard and his superior officer of the 217th, Hank Voss of the 194th, and Drake Call of the 32nd Genesee Central Division. But there were also new players in this game. This group was the founding quartet in the military phase of this conflict, but even still beside them now stood new players in the game. After the passing of the Erica Burns Memorial Bill in Alphason, not only were these allies freed from logistical and armament restrictions, they were accompanied by additional military factions from the Jade and Lepidolite parties. Once they stood against the Azurite Stone as 2 pebbles. With these additional factions, they now stood before the Azurite Stone as a boulder. Standing in formation, he looked over to General Voss. What are you going to do, General, after this is over? Largemouth Bass, Commander, Zug Island, I've got a date with a rod. How about you, General Call? Voss asked the Genesee Central Division General. We didn't have the manpower to begin with. We had to start drafting members of the population in Genesee. Just to fill out the division, now I've got reports coming through the wires back home. Something's brewing in Mount Morris. Fortunately, the East 3rd Militia is on scene, but they might need some help soon. I'm not sure what's going to happen after this. I just know I got to get back to Genesee. Hundreds of thousands of troops and their various color alignments now began to populate the fields of West Leroy. Despite the momentum of the occasion, the commander couldn't help but notice the tension on the faces of General Shepard, his superior, and General Voss. But never mind that. We've got a war to win here. The engine of the Azurite political machine was beginning to knock, and this war was winding down to its final days. The Fall of Cedric Lockett. Chapter: When the Walls Close In. Commander Cedric Lockett stood on the observation deck of his command bunker, his weathered hands gripping the metal railing as he gazed out at the sea of enemy forces spreading across the fields of West Leroy. The morning sun cast long shadows over hundreds of thousands of soldiers, jasper green, jade emerald, and lepidolite purple banners fluttering in the breeze like a rainbow of his impending doom. Once, this territory had been his stronghold, his fortress. The legislative restrictions had kept his enemies at bay, forcing them to watch helplessly from beyond the boundaries of law. But the Erica Burns Memorial Bill had changed everything. The walls that had protected him were now closing in, and Lockett could feel the weight of inevitability pressing down on his shoulders. Behind him, his subordinates shuffled nervously, the lieutenant checking and rechecking his sidearm, the major studying tactical maps that no longer offered any hope of victory, the sergeant pacing like a caged animal. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant rumble of enemy vehicles and the static of radio communications. "Sir," the lieutenant finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "The governor's investigation is still fresh, but the press is calling it the biggest corruption scandal in state history." Lockett didn't turn around. He knew what was coming. Dr. Emerlin Cast, the man he'd followed since the beginning of this conflict, was finished. And when the investigators finished with the governor, they would come for his military commanders next. The shady deals, the misappropriated funds, the weapons transfers, all of it would come to light. "How long do we have?" Lockett asked, his voice hollow. "Hours, maybe less," the major replied. "They've got overwhelming numbers, air support, and now they've got the legal authority to move freely through our territory. We're outnumbered 50-1. Lockett reached into his jacket and pulled out a bottle of gin, its amber contents catching the sunlight. He unscrewed the cap and took a long drink, the alcohol burning away the last of his illusions about victory. "Gentlemen," he said, turning to face his officers, "let's be honest about our situation. We're finished. The governor's going down, and he's going to take all of us with him, unless we make a choice right now." The lieutenant shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting we face reality," Lockett interrupted, taking another drink. "Look out there. That's not just the 204th anymore. That's Hank Voss's 194th, Drake Call's 31st, and half the military factions in the state. They've got lepidolite support, jade backing, and the legal authority to crush us completely." The major stepped forward. "Commander, if we surrender, they'll court-martial us. We'll face charges for everything we've done under the governor's orders. And if we don't surrender, we'll be dead by nightfall," Lockett replied grimly. "At least this way, we live to see another day. Maybe we can make a deal. Provide testimony about the governor's activities in exchange for leniency." The sergeant stopped pacing and stared at his commander. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" Lockett looked out at the enemy forces one more time, then back at his men. "We started this war following orders from corrupt politicians. We don't have to die for them too." The silence that followed was deafening. Each man wrestled with the reality of their situation, the weight of impending defeat, the knowledge that their cause had been built on lies and greed, and the slim hope that surrender might offer a path to redemption. Finally, the major nodded slowly. "What are your orders, Commander?" Lockett set down the gin bottle and straightened his uniform. "Sergeant, I want you to find a white flag and a vehicle. Drive out there and tell their commander that I want to discuss terms of surrender." The sergeant's face went pale. "Sir, you what?" Lockett's voice carried a sharp edge. "Sir, I'm not sure I should be the one to—" "Private!" the sergeant barked, spinning toward the youngest member of their group. "You heard the commander. Get a white flag and prepare a vehicle. We're going to parley." The private, barely out of his teens, looked like he might be sick. "Sergeant, I don't think—" "You don't think what?" the sergeant snapped. "You don't think you should follow orders? You don't think you want to live through this day?" The private swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, sir. White flag, vehicle ready for parley." As the private hurried away to carry out his orders, Lockett turned back to the observation deck. In the distance, he could see the enemy commanders gathered around their own command post, tiny figures discussing strategy that would no longer be necessary. "Sir," the lieutenant asked quietly, "what do you think they'll do to us?" Lockett shrugged. "Depends on what we can offer them. Information about the governor's network, details about the corruption, maybe testimony about the Rains brothers' operations. We might be more valuable alive than dead." The sound of an engine starting drew their attention. Below, the private was climbing into a blue Jeep, a makeshift white flag attached to the antenna. The young soldier looked terrified, but he was doing his duty. "There he goes," the major said softly. "The end of the 325th. Lockett watched the Jeep drive away from their position, kicking up dust as it headed toward the enemy lines. "No," he said quietly, "not the end. Maybe the beginning of something better." Across the battlefield, a Lepidolite sergeant raised his binoculars and watched the blue Jeep approach. The white flag was clearly visible, fluttering in the wind like a symbol of hope in a conflict that had already claimed too many lives. "There's a blue Jeep arriving with a large white flag," the sergeant shouted to his commanding officers. The Jeep came to a stop at the edge of the enemy encampment, and the private stepped out, his hands clearly visible, his face pale with fear. An escort of soldiers surrounded him, but they didn't raise their weapons. The private was led through the sea of troops toward the command post, where the commander of the 204th stood waiting alongside General Hank Voss Sr. and General Drake Call. The three veteran officers watched as the young soldier approached, his message carrying the weight of ending a war. The private snapped to attention, his voice trembling but clear. "Sir, Commander Lockett requests permission to discuss terms of surrender." The words hung in the air like a prayer answered. After all of the bloodshed, corruption, and political manipulation, the end was finally in sight. The commander of the 204th exchanged glances with his fellow officers, then nodded solemnly. "Tell your commander we'll hear his terms." As the private saluted and prepared to return to his lines, the three generals stood in silence, each understanding that this moment marked not just the end of a battle, but the beginning of a reckoning that would reshape their entire world. The Azurite machine had finally broken down, and now came the hard work of rebuilding something better from the wreckage. As the blue Jeep pulled off with the white flag headed back for the Azurite command post, the entire battlefield erupted in cheer. Specialist James Howe said, "Damn, I brought a whole box of condoms at this date and ain't even get to smell the pussy, but the shit is finally over." As the terms of surrender were discussed, General Shepard's superior instructed him to gather the commanding officers of the 217th and return to the forward operating base. He was given a very specific set of instructions, a set of instructions that he didn't like but was duty-bound to obey. General Voss accompanied him. At a debriefing room at the 217th Forward Operating Base, Lieutenant Doyon Rand sat uncomfortably in a chair at a table across from General Shepard and General Voss. There had been a palpable tension throughout the entire day, despite the magnitude of what had just happened. One war just ended, but he had the feeling that another war was just about to begin. "Lieutenant Rand," General Shepard said, "it is my unfortunate duty to inform you that you are being relieved of your command in the 217th. Doyon sighed. He sort of saw it coming. He asked, "Is this about Maxwell?" "I'm not sure, son," Shepard replied, "but Dickhead's got a hard-on for you. I never liked a son of a bitch." "Shit like this is exactly why," General Voss intervened. "This doesn't have to be the end of your military career, Lieutenant." I can always use a good soldier like you at the 194th. Don't think of it as an ending. Think of it as a beginning. Come on home, son. Doyon Rand sat there for a second, weighing his options. Joining the 194th meant that he'd be closer to home. Despite having to argue with Amberson about leaving the military, it wouldn't have been all that bad. He still preferred the military over working at the family shop any day. He could incorporate his own mercenary service, but he didn't have the funds nor the credit. I'll give you some time to think it over, son, said General Voss as he placed a hand on his shoulder. General Shepard placed his hand on the opposite shoulder. You remind me of my son, Curtis Jr., he said. Even though you're no longer a part of the 217th, you'll always be a part of my heart. Whatever you need, son, just call me. As he removed his hand, he also removed the 217th patch on Doyon's shoulder. As he exited the briefing room, Llewellyn and James Howe were waiting on him. So, it's true? They shit-canned you? Yeah. Damn, man. What are we gonna do for shits and giggles without Doyon Winks around? Rand playfully punched Llewellyn on the shoulder. You saved my life, Lieutenant, on numerous occasions. I'll always be in your debt for that. Same goes here, said Specialist James Howe. What are you going to do now? I'm not sure, Doyon replied, but there's sure to be a party. You've got to stick around for that. After all you've done in this war, I guess you guys are right, Doyon replied. Maybe I'll check into a hotel. Final chapter. The sun rises. The snow had melted. Only gray patches clung stubbornly in the cracks of the asphalt outside the abandoned grocery store on Binder Street. Roderick Murneth moved silently through the shattered front doors. No entourage. No enforcers. Just him. He stepped into the dim corridors. The rot of chemicals, smoke, and memory still clung to the walls like old ghosts. His leather boots echoed through the darkened aisles. The meat department remained scorched black. The center aisle, still fractured from shrapnel. But the silence was new. He inhaled not just to breathe, but to search, to smell. He stopped. A single hair, not long, not short, thick, wiry. The kind that belonged to a soldier or a warrior. Dark, he knelt, lifted it gently from the floor, holding it to the light, trickling through a broken ceiling tile. His nostrils flared. His pupils narrowed. He pocketed the hair. No words. No reaction. Just a storm rising behind his eyes. At the Cobalt Moon Kodastic Temple on Gallagher Street, deep in Conant Jarden, he knelt back to the altar. Before him, chalk lines curved across the stone floor, ancient Kodastic symbols forming a ritual circle. From a small cage, he retrieved a sparrow. From his coat pocket, a ceremonial dagger. In one fluid motion, he stabbed the bird. Its blood ran hot into the bowl before him. He lifted the bowl, set it atop the burner at the heart of the altar. As the blood began to boil, he reached into his coat once more, pulled out the wiry hair, held it, considered it, then dropped it into the bubbling red. His eyes narrowed, his breath slowed. The suns, he whispered. Then, in one sharp motion, he kicked the altar. The bowl toppled. The blood hissed on the stone. And in the silence that followed, something shifted. Something unseen. Something ancient awakened. General Lockett's testimony against the governor was the final nail in his political career. He resigned in shame. News cameras capturing the final moments as he exited the governor's mansion into a limousine, throwing 2 peace signs in the air and then waving the camera goodbye. Joel Mowat, MM 541st, Azurite House District Rep, was brought up on charges of corruption. His trial is still pending. The end of war celebration parade on Main Street in downtown Kalamazoo was epic. Doyon Rand, no longer a lieutenant, now a civilian, admired his former comrades of the 217th. As they marched down the city's main thoroughfare in parade fashion, General Shepard spotted Doyon in the crowd. Doyon offered a solemn salute. The entire battalion returned the salute. Further down Main Street, Doyon ran into Phil Mitchell. "Hey, Phil, what are you doing here? Why aren't you in the parade?" "I was a draftee," he answered. After Lockett surrendered, all draftees of Genesee were given their double D forms. "I'm glad to say I'm a civilian again." There was a lady and a young man with him. "Lieutenant, I'd like for you to meet my wife Denise and my oldest son, Alfred." Doyon nodded. "Why aren't you in the parade, Lieutenant? And where's your uniform?" "Long story," Doyon replied. "Anyway, enjoy civilian life. It's good seeing you, Phil. I'm going to get something to drink." At the Main Street pub, the atmosphere was festive. Martin Maxwell and Rita were seated near the bar when Doyon walked in. "You look different out of uniform," said Rita. "These are my civilian clothes. This is what I wear in street brawls." "They look even better with blood on them." Martin Maxwell laughed. "A round of drinks for the former lieutenant, bartender," Martin said, raising his glass. "To Burns, Smock, and all of the fallen and unsung heroes of this conflict, thank Kodos it's all over. This one's for Darius Lewis," Doyon said as he raised his glass and downed the content. "What are you going to do now that you're a civilian?" Martin asked. "I'm considering joining up with the 194th, Doyon replied. Just then, boom! An explosion rocked Main Street. Shrapnel and glass flew throughout the bar. Maxwell rose and ran out to Main Street to see what was going on. The unmistakable garb of low-ranking members of the Rain brothers. He observed as they fled the scene. He rushed back in the bar. "Is everybody okay?" Doyon was clutching Rita. She had been injured to Bronson Methodist Hospital. They rushed. An hour had passed. When a young nurse came out to the lobby to address Maxwell and Doyon, "She's stable now. You can go back and see her if you like, but please keep it brief. She'll need her rest." Rita lay relaxing on her hospital bed as the two men entered the room. "Rita, are you okay?" Martin asked. "I'm fine," but just as she began to speak, a doctor walked into the room. You're quite the lucky little lady. No concussions, no broken bones. But I got your blood work back. Did you know that you're pregnant?" The room went still. Doyon, conflicted but understanding of the circumstances, asked the doctor, "Is it a boy?" The doctor replied, "I'm not sure yet, but I know it's strong. It survived what would kill most." Kodos? Coding indicates that it's A100 prime. They all glanced at each other. "I guess that makes you and the lucky man primes as well, huh, Rita? Get your rest. We'll have you out of here by the morning." The doctor left. Then Rita turned to Maxwell. "Max, could you give us a moment alone for a second?" "Cool, baby. I'ma mosey on down to the vending machine and get me a pack of squares," Maxwell replied, patting Doyon on the shoulder as he exited the room. "What are we gonna do?" "I'm not quite sure," was Doyon's reply, "but I'm not ashamed either. I knew the rules of the game when I played it." Rita smiled. "I know that you're a husband. I never wanted to be a home wrecker. Ever since Angus's father died in Inkster, I just wanted to be loved again by a military man. It's nothing like that discipline, that structure. Some women can't deal with it. I rather enjoy it myself." "How are you going to explain this to your wife?" Rita asked. "Not sure about that either," Doyon replied. "You go back home to FA. I'll take the child home with me. When the time is right, all necessary truths will be revealed. Times pass and seasons change." Doyon, now enlisted with the 194th, was no longer with his wife, but he decided against marrying Rita as well. If the military wanted me to have a bride, they would have issued me one. Using some of his share from the family purse, he bought an apartment building on Petoskey Street in Finkel Acres. From time to time, Rita and her daughter Angus, along with Doyon Rand Jr., would stay in one of the penthouses on the 7th floor. The apartment building was nearly dilapidated when he bought it from the Finkel Acres Land Bank, but they added their touches, and eventually they would turn this home into a castle. Epilogue: Foundations in Finkel Acres. Years had passed since the dust of war had settled across the state of Kalamazoo, but in Finkel Acres, tucked into a block in the east of the city, something new had begun to stir. Doyon Pops Rand Sr., no longer a young soldier but far from retired, kept himself sharp through service with the 194th Southeast Battle Division stationed just around the corner at St. Gregory's Outpost. When he wasn't at the base, he was at his building on Petoskey Street, a multi-level brick and steel husk he'd resurrected from city auction ashes. He didn't just buy the place, he made it his. The 7th floor was where Rita came and went, back and forth with her sons from Conat Jardin to FA on her own clock. Theirs had never been simple. They had never married, and they likely never would. But some stories are more permanent than vows. Together, in the spaces between wars and seasons, they had brought forth 3 sons. The first was Ghetto Finger Rand, or as Pops sometimes called him when the streets were listening, Ghetto Finger. A 100 prime, unmistakable from birth. He had his father's stare, his mother's fire, and Kodost in his bones. The others came after slowly, like verses in a song that only gets written between battles. Tazakai and Mazikor, not lesser, not weaker, but never quite equal to Ghetto Finger in the eyes of the rhythm that pulsed through their father's bloodline. Still, Pops trained them the same. In the converted boiler room turned basement shooting range, echoes of target practice bounced off cinder block walls. Doyon would pace behind them with a stopwatch and a smirk, correcting their footwork, analyzing their posture, making small adjustments that echoed like prophecy. Every drill, every click, every shot meant something. Secretly, some time ago, he had began studying martial arts himself. General Shepard dropped by sometimes. He leaned against the stairwell railing, arms folded, watching. "You built a forge down here," he said once. "No, Curtis," Pops corrected. "They are the forge." Upstairs, in one of the hallways that hadn't been painted in years, a photo of a young woman in naval garb hung quietly. Angels Maxwell Jones, daughter of Rita, half-sister to the boys, now a newly enlisted crew officer in the Pershing fleet, on the back of the frame, in her handwriting. "If ever comes a time where you lose your way, if you look, you will find me, love, big sister." Angles. All of the boys cherished her calls and visits. Occasionally, Job Rand Doyon's firstborn son by his ex-wife will move in time after time. Not often, but enough. He wasn't military. Didn't want to be. He carried himself like a man who worked from his heart, lived with his thoughts, and smiled when he didn't want to explain things. He stood back during drills, quiet, observant. He nodded when the boys landed perfect groupings. He didn't cheer, he didn't correct, but every now and then a look crept into his eyes. Not anger, but something quieter, deeper. He was the first son. Yet the 3 brothers that followed him were named after his father, not him. Rita had made that decision alone, and Pops, despite his past, never challenged her. Maybe it was her way of claiming the legacy. Maybe it was her way of protecting it. Either way, Job noticed. He left early that day, told Pops he had some work to do. Never looked back on the way out. Pops said nothing. But as the 3 boys lined up again and raised their sidearms, he exhaled deeply, tapping the old stopwatch on his belt. Line 'em up. Eyes on the dot. Ghetto call it. Ghetto Finger smirked. 3 shots. 2 seconds. The shots cracked tight, clean, precise. Downstairs smelled of brass and concrete. Upstairs smelled like incense and Rita-esque cocoa butter lotion. The building wasn't just a home anymore. It was a fortress of discipline, a sanctuary of legacy. And beneath the tiles, the steel, and the echoes of missed birthdays and misunderstood sons, Kodos watched, still silent, but not asleep. The end, for now.